Sure.
Madam Mayor, it is 5:09 and we are live.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the special City Commission meeting on Tuesday, June 28th, 2022 at 5 o'clock. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mayor Betty Resch,
Here.
Vice Mayor Christopher McVoy,
Present.
Commissioner Sarah Maliga,
Here.
Commissioner Kimberly Stokes,
Here.
Commissioner Reynaldo Diaz.
Here.
Thank you very much. And we are going to pledge allegiance once tonight at the regular meeting. We're going to skip it for this meeting, just to be different. So today we have new business. Today we're here to talk about and make the advisory board appointments following the interviews that we held on June 11th and June 21st. And we're going to start with the boards that have agreement. And Madam Clerk, I'm going to be looking to you for a little, we all have papers on our desks here. And, okay. So let's start with we're going to start with the boards that there was actually a majority on, so that we'll take care of a few of them. So on the Planning and Zoning Board, it seems that it was unanimous for the top three of Alexander, Daniel Waleski, and Evelyn Urquio. Okay, is that correct? So I would ask for a motion to approve those three.
Motion to approve those three.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The CRA, I see on our list, we have, and they're highlighted, Donna Kerner, Daniel Morgan, and Ann Fairfax on the CRA. That was the three that had the majority. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Library Advisory Board. We have three vacancies, and the people that got the majority votes were Emily Abbott, Erica Gettig, and Mary Lindsay. May I have a motion?
And I had just a brief one on that one, if I might.
Okay,
They're all, everybody who applied is fine. The only thought that comes to mind is Mary has been on, I believe, a very long time. Tricia, I don't believe, has been on, I don't know if she's been on any boards, but she certainly hasn't been on recently. There might be something to be said, even though I see that there was a difference of one on the votes, of considering swapping Mary out. Mary will certainly continue with the Little Free Libraries, but maybe there's something to be said for stirring it up a little bit, giving other people a chance to serve. That's just an opinion. It's no more than that.
have you spoken with Mary about that?
I have not spoken with Mary about that.
Okay. Okay,
Oh, sorry, Kim. I had recommended Tricia for the HRPB, which is why
right.
you see, so my vote in the second round is not reflected here. I know that she's very close to the media specialist at North Grade, and I think she would be a huge asset because she has such a great connection with some of our local schools.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to clarify that second round one isn't totally reflective, because I was like, well, if she gets on HRPB, then I don't want her on two boards.
I did the exact same thing. I went through and actually scratched her out
Right.
of that because I had her on HRPB.
Right. So,
And I know she can't take on two boards.
yeah,
And I believe she said, correct me if
She liked the library.
her first preference was the library. So that's just a thought.
So let's go back. I guess maybe should we do HRPB then? Because she's chosen as one of them. And if we're gonna move her to library,
Okay,
would that make sense?
we're gonna go rogue here,
I know, sorry.
but please try to keep I have the script which has the different
Right.
as we go down, so I can see our paperwork. Commissioner Malega, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say the exact
Do
same thing that
HRPB.
Commissioner Stokes said. I didn't put her, I voted for her
Right.
first, but then when I went to HRPB and saw that she was on the top for that, I'm like, well, she's not gonna do both, so I just didn't
Okay.
go for it. But if we take her off of HRPB and put her on the library board, then that leaves another vacancy for HRPB.
Which then the next person down would have been Anthony Segrich. For the HRPB, the top two vote getters were Nadine Heinz and Tricia Allison Mishler, then Ricardo Martin, and then Susan Mason, and then Anthony Segrich. If if we're taking out Tricia and putting her on the library board, then do I have a minute? How do you want to handle it?
And it would would it go to Ricky,
Who's Ricky?
Ricardo Martin?
Well, he's up there already. I mean,
No,
well, there's
four.
three,
There's
right?
four.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
So it would be Ricardo Martin, Susan Mason, or Anthony Segrich.
I'd like to make a comment at this point on this particular board and maybe in general too, but I think there is nothing that says that we have to fill the boards with the folks that applied in this round. It is perfectly okay for us as a commission to say, hey, thank you. A number of people applied. There's a lot of interest. That's great. But of the pool that applied, and we have 4 vacancies, we don't feel that we have 4 collectively. We do not feel that we have 4 that are the most appropriate for that. We are perfectly capable of re-advertising. I think we need to do it on a couple other boards also. I would be very uncomfortable simply moving forward and say, well, we have somebody that got 2 votes out of 5. Why don't we just put them on? That is not a majority of support for them. So I don't think we should put them on. And I would be much more in favor.
Are
of-
you suggesting only then appointing the 2?
No, he said just,
Depending on which way you went with Tricia, it would be there
Oh,
2
then
at
there's
one.
one.
yeah, you can't do that. That's 4 vacancies out of 7 on the historical
Of
board.
course you can do that. It's very
You can't.
possible.
They need to.
Then you have
they need to-
3. That's not a quorum.
Then we advertise quickly.
oh no, if we appoint these 2, we would have 5 people, which is a quorum plus a spare in case somebody gets sick.
All right, there's 4 vacancies, so that would, well, there's 7 members, there's 3. If we appoint 1,
That's only 4.
which is a quorum,
Which I
which is very
am
tight.
uncomfortable with. That's tight.
Right.
Extremely uncomfortable with.
I would prefer
Excuse
to-
me, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
I believe the intention was for the boards that didn't have a majority to discuss them and see if you could reach a majority tonight.
Okay, all right, I think that's kind of
Thank
what
you.
we might be doing in a way, but.
I'm gonna wait till my turn. I think I was 3rd late, so I'll,
No,
Oh, I
think
didn't
we
turn
were-
mine
no,
off. Sorry.
I don't know.
Yes.
I've heard a lot of feedback from our interviews and I've thought about them a lot myself. And due to the number of applicants that we had, the rush nature, 1 minute to introduce yourself, a few minutes for questions. I don't feel like I got a chance to really dig deeper into some of the questions that I would have liked to ask. So if we do a second round of HRPV, I know in my district, it's talked about all the time, the headaches and hassles, and we have some real things that we want that board to accomplish. So
With the HRPV.
with HRPV, yes, because we want to protect our neighborhoods, we want to value our historic homes, but we also want people to be able to invest in their homes. There's a lot
Mhm.
there
No, it's a hot one.
that I would be perfectly happy appointing the top 2 here that the majority of us agreed on, and then gives us a quorum plus an alternate, so that if anybody's sick or on vacation at any point, we can still meet. Because the last thing I want to do is add an extra burden to the people in my district because they need to get their windows approved and we don't have a quorum. So I am in favor of appointing the 2 people that got 4 selections. And then when we do our next round, we can revisit too, as a board, what it is that we really feel, because I think everybody here has mentioned concerns in the past for this particular topic.
Okay, if we do that though, this all started with Mr. McBoy.
Right.
Mary, so we keep then, are you suggesting that we keep Tricia on the historic preservation, rather than the library board?
Well, that was my thought.
That's-
That's my thoughts were Tricia here. That gets us majority plus or quorum plus 1. And then we have the 3 people that we could fill the library board. Mary Lindsay would still serve. And I do think it would be great if she serves out a term and we can talk to her and
Yeah.
say, you've been doing amazing things for this community. And I've heard her make comments in the past that she wants to bring new people and things like that. I think we can have that. I
So
think we
you're
can give her
suggesting
another
taking
term.
her off?
I think we could give her, if we keep Tricia and Nadine on HRPB, I think we can keep Mary on the library
Mhm.
board.
Because I mean, the relationship between the library board and the bookstore and the,
Mhm.
I mean, it's a very tight relationship. They have a very tight working relationship. And God knows nobody puts in more time with books than Mary. So your suggestion is for HRPV, Nadine and Tricia.
Mhm.
Commissioner, Mr. I just didn't call on you yet.
Mhm.
Oh, it's you.
Same name.
Same manager.
Madam.
Madam Madam City Manager.
I think you all worked it out. I was just trying to make sure we have a quorum because I'm not sure when the next meeting is, but I was just concerned that
Right,
we have a quorum. And so by having 5, once you all finalize your decision today on HRPB, that my concern is we have to make sure that those 5 appear, that we
Right.
don't have an absence, then we run risk of
well,
not
4
having a
is still a
quorum.
quorum. 4 is still a quorum. So
4.
that's 4 and it's
Yes,
fair.
yes. So I'm just making sure
Okay.
we're there because we're very tight.
Commissioner McBoy.
Yeah, I would just like to be clear and go on the record that on this particular board, I would definitely like us to revisit the areas of expertise that we ask for. Right now, we have real estate, we have land development, banking.
But we'd have to change the ordinance for that.
And this is my formal request that we do that sooner rather than later.
Okay, but we're here today.
So just, this
okay,
is, since
all
we're
right.
talking about it,
Okay.
that's all.
I'm gonna make the motion to approve the Historical Preservation Board the way it is and the Library Board the way it is.
Nadine and Tricia on the HRPB.
Yes, ma'am.
And the library board, Emily, Erica, and Mary.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so HRPB is done. Library board is done. PMZ, I think, is done.
Yes.
CRAs, do we have to look at? I'm gonna go back to the list. I'm gonna go back to the list. So
You
planning,
did
was up.
P and Z, CRA, HRPB, and Library.
Right, well, CRA is next.
Done.
We did that.
We did that.
CRA is done.
Yep.
Um,
I have Board of Trustees, please on, I don't know if the
We're
order.
on C-51
Oh.
canal.
Okay.
okay, this is an interesting one. Because, right now, we've talked quite a bit about, what it is and what, how it's gonna expand and how we're gonna define it. There are currently 5 members I see. What, Madam Clerk, do we know what the amount of, how many we're looking for on that board? Or is it?
Not until you reconfigure it.
Right, right. So,
It's up to us.
and who, could you have off the top of your head, who's on it now?
It says right here at the top.
Oh,
Mark
here, I'm
Block,
sorry, Mark,
Fold.
Sally, Laura, and Michelle, okay. Yes, Kim.
I think Commissioner Malega had her light up for, okay.
I keep forgetting to shut it off. I'm sorry.
I like to keep things orderly, but my question was if this, so I'm guessing this board doesn't have a term associated to it. And if
Apparently,
these 5 members were notified that we were having,
right.
if
And
they're
they
still
applied.
interested
Mhm.
or not, because they didn't reapply, but I'm wondering if they didn't think they needed to. I'm just
What- for the
looking for some
C51?
clarification on,
There are no terms.
there's no term. So did we reach out to them and tell them anything
They
or?
didn't need to reapply because technically their terms weren't up. Plus there was some confusion as to whether there still is a C-51 canal. Some people felt there wasn't. It's certainly within your purview to table this one board until you reconfigure it or make appointments based on what you think you're gonna do.
Okay, and then, but then once we reconfigure it, we don't need to have the 3 people here tonight come back in and interview and
Right.
do all that.
There might be other people interested.
Right,
Yeah.
and then we'll see of the 5 who's interested in still serving once it,
All right, who wants to
Done.
table it?
I know you
I
have a
move to
comment.
table it and that we plan to have a discussion somewhere
Yeah.
not too far out. And I would get it away from the C-51 canal. I would make it
Right,
a water
Waterway.
resources board,
something more,
something
Inclusive.
toward that direction that is more inclusive to all our water resources. Not that we have a lot, but we have some really important ones.
we have some great water resources. Okay, great. So do I have a motion? Do we have a motion? Do I have a
DS has. I don't-
Second? Or did you do a
Second
comment?
it.
Wait,
I can second it, but I do have a comment.
okay, why don't you do both?
Not to hindrance it, but yeah, I mean, to Commissioner McVoy's point, like I definitely have a really not so much specific, but I definitely have an idea of what this advisory committee can evolve into.
Mhm.
And it'd be something I would love to like take on. And the people that that applied, it's partly because I asked them to apply because I know what they can bring to the table.
Mhm.
Somebody is missing from this list because there was some communication issue. So if we table it, I think that's great because then we could consider her again. I mean, these are, district employees,
Right.
local people,
Right.
people that could get us grants, so on
Yeah.
and so forth.
Money.
Yeah.
He said money.
Because, yeah,
Here's-
I mean, C-51, not just C-51, but all
No.
of our waterfront.
I think we
public
have
properties.
consensus is
Yeah.
that we'll redefine this, but we want to have a
Yeah.
committee, but we want to redefine the. committee.
So we redefine it, right? So the people who are on the committee aren't necessarily going to be setting, just so that they
Aren't going to be
understand.
what?
Just so that everyone understands, it's we, the commission, that sets the parameters,
Correct.
not the people on the committee.
That's
Right,
correct.
Right.
Thank you.
Just so they,
That's
yeah.
leadership.
Right. Did somebody,
Do we have a second?
did you second?
I did
Yes, he did.
yeah.
Okay, do we have a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that was easy.
And by district, Commissioner Diaz meant the school district, I'm quite sure.
Aye.
Some of us say district and it means the water.
I was wondering, water management, they're everywhere.
Well, the water management just has a long tradition of public service
Yeah.
side of it. A
Yeah.
lot of people serve in the community.
City Tree Board. We have
Oop, where am I?
6 vacancies. We have 3. We have one here. Let's see, we could have, okay. We have 3 majorities.
Yep.
That would bring us up to,
Four.
well, Donna's
Donna's still
on
on,
the
right?
CRA though. She's going to the CRA.
But she said
But
she'd
she
carry
could be
out.
on the tree board.
Oh, she made, oh,
fill the-
great.
She'd finish out this term.
Oh, that's 2020, so she can be on both, because
Mhm.
it's not, okay, oh, fine, okay, so then they would have 4. And then perhaps advertise it when we do.
Yeah.
I think
Okay, so do I have a motion to appoint Diane Brown, Giovanna Dominguez Timor, and Ginny Powell onto the tree board?
Motion.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
And Donna, if you're listening, thank you for committing
Yeah.
to both. That's big.
I know.
I'm
Very-
sorry, Madam Mayor, who made the motion?
Christopher McVoy.
Christopher.
Okay, and Commissioner Stokes was the second, I believe.
Yep. Yeah,
Thank you.
we also have, when we do we have somebody who got snafu'd in the details, but that they've been on and would be willing to continue. So. we'll
the tree
get to
board?
that when
Okay.
we visit.
Construction Board of Adjustments and Appeals, we have 6 vacancies. We
My
have
goodness.
2 unanimous. Mr. DeVoe was the third, which didn't get enough votes. And we have 6 vacancies.
So I assume that means, yeah, we have 1 on, so we'd still be shy 1.
Yeah.
So
Um,
wait a minute, so he was suggested because I spoke with him and he had mentioned planning and zoning and CRA.
Right.
Did anybody ask him if he would be interested in this board? Like I talked,
I think we asked, people are generally willing to serve wherever they're needed.
okay.
I recall that we asked him at the casino.
Yeah,
Well, I
and he
wasn't, I
has-
wasn't there, so I mean,
yeah.
I could only
That's
hear so
obvious.
much.
And
Um,
he has, I mean, God knows he's been in the city a long time and knows about process and how you have to go through things. So if we would like to consider Mr. DeVoe to be a 3rd member, I would certainly entertain.
It would actually be 4th, right?
That would be the 4th
Yep.
person.
I would make that motion.
Okay, do I have a second to include Mr. DeVoe?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so Thomas Forlenza, Mark Savarian, and Ed DeVoe, welcome to the Construction Board of Appeals. Electric Utility Advisory.
Oh, gosh.
Motion to approve.
Okay, second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Finance Advisory Board. I have a question.
Yes.
There are 7 members with 6 vacancies, and the next vacancy is going to expire on the 23rd. I have to say that I
Wow.
am wondering about the Finance Advisory Board and what its role is, and I mean, that's a pretty high level. I mean, if we're advising to the finance director of, the budget of the city, I wonder what the role is, and is it something that we could maybe think about not having?
Well, and I agree with that thought, Mayor. And if we choose for whatever reason to have it, I did talk about it with our finance director, and he mentioned that in a previous city, he had a very experienced board that were all folks that knew a lot about finance, and he found it quite helpful. So that put in my head that if we're going to have one, don't put people like me on it, because I don't know
Right.
squat.
It's not, I want to be involved in the city. It's, I'm going to make financial, I mean, I wouldn't be on it.
Yeah. So maybe if we want to revisit it at some point, that we think about, well, what would make sense,
Mhm.
that so that it uses everybody's time wisely.
How does everybody else? Oh, I see two lights on.
I think you were first.
Yeah, I had the same exact question basically, and I came in my in my mind putting a thought on it. I came away with two answers, the two opposite answers. Do we not have it if there if we can't find anyone? But I see huge potential in this kind of board, and I'm a little bit disappointed that we didn't have too many applications, because I feel like there has to be forensic accountants and good CPAs and people in town that could, be huge for this. And one role that I was thinking of in terms of finance advisory is, one of the comments that comes up regularly and often questions or suggestions is being more transparent with the city's finances. And, I'll put like, as example, there are towns around that put out, monthly bulletins on where every cent goes out. I'm not saying that's what we should do,
Mhm.
but we can definitely, if we had a solid advisory board of accountants, forensic accountants, CPAs, and people who are super well qualified for this, we could be moving towards that
So,
goal.
Kim,
Well, I just have I have two things, a general thought about all of our boards. I think the word advisory in there can be loaded, and, we talked to the tree board and they seem to want to be more action oriented. We want to get together. We want to create pamphlets. We want to produce things, but they're an advisory board. So they're supposed to give us advice on how to vote for things, and it
Right.
limits them, and it's not really what they want to be doing. And
board, you mean?
the tree board,
Yeah.
and then the finance advisory board, we have an entire finance department.
Right, right.
But I think it's really important that our citizens are involved in the conversations about how we spend our money. Is it necessarily that they're giving us a formal advice because they're super experts in all these areas? Or are they saying, you guys have to choose between my roads? It doesn't take a rocket scientist accountant to say, you're choosing between my roads getting fixed or an extra event. How do our citizens come together and look at a very high level view of, this is the state of our city, this is where we're spending our money?
And I think that's what I don't mean,
Well, I'm just saying, I think it would be a huge opportunity to have a group, not necessarily, I hear one thing of like, we want really super qualified people, but I'm just throwing out this other thing of, in the name, the goal of a board like this could be the transparency for people to understand how our money is being spent at a high level, because I think that's what our residents want. They don't want this really granular stuff that only us, our finance department, and then now 7 super qualified people understand. They want it digestible. They want an overview. They want to know how their taxes are being spent.
Right.
So I think,
But I think what you're expressing, that was exactly what we're talking about, is the role of the board. What is the role of the board? And I think it would serve us well to sort of redefine what.
Yeah,
it is. Get back to it.
we definitely need to redefine it, but I see value in having citizens participating in conversations about how their money is being spent.
Which on the, also at the time, like, we're going through budget now, and I'm learning a lot more this year about it than I did last year. And I'm looking, here's the first part of the budget. This is what we need to keep the wheels going and the
Mhm.
lights on and the basics, and then we have the supplementals. I mean, almost, it's on public record that people can look at what the supplementals are. That's really the discretionary funds that we have. The way I see it, there's some play, I guess, in the, the first part of the budget. It's the second part, which, is it a road, or is it a program? Is it an employment, or is it, so I mean, it's not, and I mean, it's horrible to have to listen to budget hearings. It's really, if I wasn't up here, but, but people do have the opportunity, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but people do have the opportunity to, if they're interested in the budget, if they're a budget person, they can absolutely follow just along with us, because we're getting the same, in the public hearings, we're getting the same information.
They don't have, I think a board like this would allow regular citizens access to our finance department to ask questions, to pick things apart, to offer ideas, to have discussions. You could get people in a room that disagree and they, and then we don't have to, I don't have time to meet with. None of us have a lot of
I kind
time.
of think, I mean, yeah, I
And
mean,
so that's the point, I think, of some of these is to get people in a room, let them kind of weigh some options, pick things apart and then present to us. So we
part of
can
me says
define
that's
it later.
our job as the elected officials. But I see
But
like,
yeah, I see like some.
I'm going to piggyback on a couple of things that Commissioner Stokes said. So first of all, I do look at the FAB board as just as the planning and zoning or HRPB. Something comes before us and there's option A, B, or C. I want to hear from the Finance Advisory Board because they've had a chance to do that deeper dive, hopefully. Fingers
but
crossed.
see, that's the role. We don't
Wait.
have the role.
So second of all, the only other thing that I'm disheartened about with the FAB board
Mhm.
is that we do not require any background checks.
Right.
We don't require a finance sheet on them. I'm going to let people make decision for our city when we don't know if they've claimed bankruptcy 3 times. Like that needs to be part of this board, in my opinion. Not to say there's anything wrong with people who get in hardship, but if we're getting people to give us advice, we need to make sure they may not have a finance background or a CPA background, but they might be a business owner of 25 years.
Yeah.
And they know cost of goods and they know return on investment and they have a different attribute to bring, right? But being more conservative about making sure that who these people are on this board, that they have that wherewithal to be financially prudent is
Do
important.
we want to table this for discussion? We just,
I think so.
Motion to table.
We can.
Motion to table.
Commissioner McGlory?
we'll come back and define it. But that, we obviously have to redefine the FAB.
Yeah, and I think we've heard some good thoughts, a range of different functions. I think the transparency is important.
Absolutely.
I think whether the board is experts or citizens,
Or
either
mixed.
way, they could help give us best practices of how can we push our information out more accessibly to.
Well, that's different. I mean, all right. Yeah.
There are cities that do it. I don't know if we have the research to do it, but. All right, so we're.
Motion to table.
Do I have a second?
Second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Electric utility board, we did. Finance advisory.
I'm sorry, I don't have that we did that, and also I have that we skipped the police.
yeah, we.
Uh,
I have police retirement, recreation,
Yeah, I
Okay,
have
sorry,
creation left.
police and recreation. Didn't we do,
we did not do the E EUAB.
we didn't.
Yeah, we did. Yes.
Oh, we did.
We did, but we can do it again.
There's only, yeah, we can do it again.
Oh. Okay, I apologize. So who made the motion and who seconded?
Made the motion, Maligo seconded.
I didn't hear made the motion. I apologize.
Chris McBoy made the motion.
And
Okay.
Sarah Maliga second.
Thank you, and I apologize.
Teamwork. All
Did we
right.
do the rec board? I
We
don't-
have 2
no,
left,
no.
rec and
We have
police.
2 rec.
Oh, and then this other packet.
Rec and.
Motion to approve.
On who, where
Which
we at?
one?
Where'd we go?
Are we Recreation Advisory Board, Danielle Hartman, Tiffany Kapner, and Theodore McMurrow?
Okay,
Yes.
wait,
What?
quickly, before we. Theodore McMorrow is a member of my church.
Yeah.
He's a older gentleman who was up here.
Ted?
Yeah, Ted. Spoke with him and he also emailed me. I personally, after speaking with him multiple times, think that he would be a better fit on one of the board of trustees versus the rec department. The board of trustees for firefighters, we had 2 vacancies, but neither applicant showed up. And then he was suggested for another board. I can't remember where.
Do I see a firefighters board here?
Oh,
US
police.
firefighters.
He was police and firefighters, but
Police or fire.
I would like to see him personally be on the firefighters pension board.
Oh, here we go.
I think that he brings a lot to the table for that. For either firefighter or police, and where Lonnie obviously is a great choice for police, then I think that would leave a good place for Ted to go on the police board.
How
that-
often do they meet?
Quarterly?
Hmm.
Anybody got an answer for that?
I believe it's quarterly, yes.
Yeah,
I'm
quarterly.
just curious if it, because we never really hear from them. I didn't know how often they meet.
I
So
guess
I'm
we're not-
wondering if it's the kind of thing where
You could do
you
both.
could do both or, meeting.
Yeah, you know what? I'm on I'm on these boards as the mayor. I'm on the board and you meet 4 times a year and you listen to them talk and they tell you how it's about stocks. And then you vote. It's not very burdensome.
So would you guys be okay with?
Because it's all about, I mean,
him being on
it's
both?
the experts telling us what's going on. It's not really so. I would have no problem with him being on both.
All right. Same thing with the Construction Board of Appeals. If somebody's on that and then they want another more
Right.
full-time board,
Right.
I don't.
So that would add, that would put, all right,
I think there's a little bit of a thought that maybe he would be more helpful on the pension boards.
For
Right.
Theodore,
I'll put them on
Ted.
both of the pensions.
Or put them on both. They're
He
only
can
meeting,
only be on one pension board because those are both
no,
decision-making
no,
boards.
the pension board and the rec board.
Yeah,
Okay.
he could be on both of those.
Okay.
One is
Right.
advisory.
Yeah.
so yeah, no, so that would be, the rec board would be Danielle, Tiffany and Ted.
Mhm.
Yes. I did have a person I put on the rec board last year. And she didn't know she was supposed to reapply, so this will give her an opportunity, Erica Cooper Hayden, to reapply. Because there are other people.
Because there's more vacancies.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we're gonna have a follow-up.
Yeah.
Okay, so do I have a motion
Motion to approve.
by Commissioner Malega, second
Second.
by Commissioner Diaz, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now, Board of Trustees, Police Retirement. Lonnie Morale,
Oh, wait a minute. What is that?
Motion to
Yeah.
approve.
second,
Second.
all in favor?
I
Aye.
beat you to it, Chris.
Board
Like,
of,
oh.
such a,
Find the paper.
what a, Board of Trustees Firefighters Pension Board. You can only be on one, so, all right, so it would be Jason or, I know Valerie Hurley, it has been on the board. She's a former employee of the city. She worked in the building and
She was in the city court. though.
she was, yeah, she was here a long time. Her whole family is very devoted to the city. I don't know why she didn't show up. We have 2 vacancies. So I mean, I would just,
Can we appoint them? even?
I would just, really,
Did that sense you?
they did
Oh, they-
apply. They both applied. We know, I mean, people know Jason and I,
They have to interview to get off of the board.
Well, I'd like to put Ted on this board for sure.
Oh, did we?
but we just
do
put him
that?
on the
We just put him on.
police board.
Oh, no, we put,
No,
we put
on
Lonnie on
firefighters.
the police.
We
Oh.
didn't do that yet. We're on firefighters right now.
Oh,
We did Lonnie for.
Yeah,
police.
Lonnie was for police.
Lonnie is for.
Okay, so we.
Oh, right,
we
okay.
Ted.
So
And then,
Ted would be on the recreation board and the
And the
firefighters
firefighters.
pension board. Okay, so we need, we only have 2 vacancies. So, somebody make a motion.
Oh, yeah, we only have 2, so we can't put them on this one.
Yeah, we can because neither one of them showed and it's split vote.
Right.
So
So-
we're gonna,
So someone would make a motion for it and give us 2 names.
I make a motion to approve Theodore and Valerie.
Okay, do I have a second?
I can't, do we know anything about either one of the 2 that didn't show? Valerie, I know. Jason, I probably know, but
He's a firefighter.
wouldn't that be,
No, it's not. We checked it out.
what's that?
It would not be we checked out with the
Right,
attorneys.
it's not a
It's not-
conflict, but wouldn't that be a more, I don't think Valerie had anything.
Well, because there's 2 firefighters who are already elected by the fire department that are already part of the
Ah,
board.
right, these are.
Yeah, they're.
These are the
Right.
citizens.
Okay, so, yeah, I guess that's fine.
So Valerie and Theodore,
Yes, ma'am. That's
do I have a
fine.
second? Do I have a second?
Going once?
Second.
All right, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye,
That
okay.
was like pulling teeth. Jeez.
it's just bizarre. So
Can we reach out? I mean, there's gonna be a second round, so I guess we could reach out. and-
if they don't want to do
They,
it,
they don't, now they don't need any more on that one.
Right, they're done.
if they,
The Board of Trustees Employee Retirement System, Wayne Lewis. We have 1 vacancy with no applications. But Wayne Lewis is suggested because he did apply for, other boards, and most people did say that they would serve on boards if they hadn't applied for it. Is your light on, Commissioner Malega?
No. Damn it.
I'm trying to remember.
Funny, it looked like,
Does, when Wayne, I don't remember which one he applied. to,
Right.
I'm the one who wrote him down as a suggestion.
Does he have a
Yes, he
some
did.
connection to retirement systems and?
Yes, he had, I don't have his application in front of me, but that's why I wrote it down.
I'm trying to
Because when we
find.
interviewed him, I also asked him some questions in regards to other boards he might feel fit for.
Okay.
And he said that he would be good with that as well.
Okay.
I don't have the original packet. I could have went and got.
okay,
Kim looks
so,
like she might have it over there.
have.
Yeah, Mr. Lewis?
These are gonna be up for the last one.
It's alphabetical.
Well, at some point it was.
Oh, not in Kim.
No doubt at some point it was alphabetical.
And I'm
Sorry.
Okay.
fine with it. As long as he's
I do have,
up for, that's kind of a specialized sort of thing.
Shoot.
I wouldn't want somebody to put me on it.
I know, when we did it, I did make notes when I asked him. Go ahead.
I do have his work experience. 30 years of commercial real estate experience, including brokerage and appraisal, masters in real estate and urban affairs, current employment as
Yeah.
senior real estate appraiser for South Florida Water Management District.
Sounds good. Okay. Do we have a motion on that one?
If you're gonna make it.
Do I have a
Motion to approve Wayne Lewis for the board of trustees.
Do I have a second? Oh, from Christian Malega, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And
Thank
so just to clarify, once we redo the financial, the relook at the FAB board, he could be on both. Because
Yeah,
if we wanted,
trust me.
with his financial background, if
Yeah.
we wanted to.
I think we did it,
We did.
correct?
Ooh, we did something. I don't know if we did it, but we did something.
We did the thing.
Something.
How was the sound?
Anybody out there in Zoom world want to complain or YouTube or
The
send us a
sound
message?
here is really good.
Oh, yeah, Melissa can tell us.
Cool.
Great. Motion to adjourn?
Thank you. Second.
Second.
All right. We have a 15-minute
Aye.
break.
Don't we have to vote?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you very much. See you in 15. Go get that coffee.
Please turn off your mics, Commission.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, it's 6 o'clock. We are live if you'd all like to unmute. You're all still mute.
Table.
Okay, now I can hear you.
Is that
Madam
better?
Mayor, it is 6:01 and we are live.
We're good. Okay.
Thank
Good
you.
evening, everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday, June 28th, 2022 City of Lake Worth Beach Utility City Commission meeting. May I have the roll call?
Yes, Mayor Betty Rush.
Here.
Vice Mayor Christopher McVoy.
Here.
Commissioner Sarah Maliga.
Here.
Commissioner Kimberly Stokes.
Here.
Commissioner Reynaldo Diaz.
Here.
Thank you. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Commissioner Stokes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, good evening. Madam Clerk, do we have any additions, deletions, or reordering?
I do not have any, Madam Mayor.
Well, thank you very much. Now we have public participation of non-agenda items and the consent agenda. Do you have any blue cards, ma'am?
I do not.
Is there anyone?
Oh, I'm sorry, bear with me. 7 came in during the last meeting. Let me just make sure they're not. So far, they're all for items.
Oh.
Yep, they're all for new business C.
Oh, new business? Okay. Okay, so, may I have a motion for the the approval of minutes? Let's approve the minutes of May 31st, 2022.
There was a discrepancy in the minutes, but it's not on this one. It's on the next agenda.
Okay. If you could let us know what that is too.
Motion to approve. I let
Yes.
Melissa know.
I
she
fixed it. I already fixed it and re-uploaded it. Thank you,
Okay.
Commissioner.
Thank you very much.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
We didn't vote.
You didn't vote on,
He seconded.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I'm such a lunch. Consent agenda. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Public hearings. We have a second reading of ordinance number 2022-11, water conservation for landscape irrigation. Madam Attorney, will you read the ordinance, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
An ordinance of the City Commission of the City of Lake Worth Beach, Florida, adopting Chapter 18 Utilities, Article 2 Water Utility, Section 18-21 Water Conservation and Irrigation, providing for local implementation of the mandatory year-round landscape irrigation conservation measures rule of the South Florida Water Management District, 40E24 FAC, providing for definitions, applicability of the ordinance, a landscape irrigation schedule, exceptions to the schedule, other requirements, variances, enforcement and penalties, renumbering of Article 3 emergency water use and for other purposes, and providing for severability, conflicts, codification, and an effective date.
Well done. Have there been any changes since the first reading?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, Madam Clerk, are there any public comments?
There are not, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
To approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Now we're at new business item A. The agreement with the USIC Holdings, Inc. doing DBA as USIC locating services for underground facilities, line locating services. I see we have a staff member here.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners, City Manager. Simple item, we do this every 2 years. Our agreement with the USIC is to locate. We share this cost with electric utilities, so they go out anytime there's an 811 call for location of underground facilities before somebody digs in accordance with state law. And this again is to piggyback a contract with Orlando Utilities Commission. We get good pricing and good service from USIC and would like to continue for another 2 years.
All right, and I just would also take just a minute to recognize the fact that your department won an award this week.
Yes, thank you. We did win an award from CETA, which is the Southeast Desalting Association, which is an industry trade organization representing utilities in Southeast United States. And we received the award for the best large membrane plant in Southeast United States.
United States, not just Florida.
Not just Florida.
All right. I think we're gonna have a little recognition for your staff on
Yeah.
that one. But I just wanted to bring that up and how proud we are and
Mhm.
thankful for our great water.
Thank you. And it's a compliments to my staff who maintain and operate the facility, the mechanics, the operators. It's their job every day to make things run up to snuff.
And it's great. Commissioner Maliga? Oh, Stokes, Commissioner Stokes?
Yep, I just had two questions. The first, is this a pass-through cost or this is something that we're just responsible for doing?
No, we're responsible.
Okay, so the people who call to ask for this service, they don't have to pay?
No, they don't have to pay. We used, in years past, we used to do it with our own forces. It became more economical to contract it out.
Okay, and then for other larger like development projects, do they do that work separately? They don't use this service, right?
Right, because they're putting new facilities in the ground and they're working on private property. This is generally for work within the right of way. People are doing digging, anyone that calls for digging and within 48 hours, USIC goes out and locates.
Okay, do we get a lot of those calls?
Yes, we get
Yeah.
a lot of them.
Like $1,000.
Oh, there's a lot of calls.
Okay.
$9 a ticket. So
Wow.
it is economical.
Okay, and then in the fiscal impact analysis, we don't have a number for 2022. Are we,
Right, this is for an FY 23 and 24.
okay, but we
We're
did,
already currently under contract for
Right.
22.
okay, so we've already, it's the same thing that we've had the previous year.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner,
That was my question is, so the $500,000 was annually last year as well, correct?
That's
Okay.
correct.
And my other question is, do we make sure I highlight it 48 hours that they're out there within 48 hours?
Yeah, they have to be. I mean, it's state law, and if someone calls for a ticket and goes out there to dig and they've waited their 48 hours, they will start digging. If the lines aren't marked, they'll assume no lines are there. Then there's
Mhm.
liability placed on the locator if they
Okay.
don't locate correctly or they didn't do a mark out.
And we haven't had any issues with them abiding by that?
No, not at all. USIC's done a good job.
Thank you. That was my only question.
Commissioner McBoy.
Two different things, totally unrelated. One, do we GIS all of this stuff? Do we map it out or do we make it?
Yes.
Located?
Not necessarily related to locating. The locates that they do are based on our mapping. We give them GIS files as to what we believe is underground. We constantly update those GIS files based on as-built drawings when we do a new construction project or a developer does a construction project. So it's a constantly evolving process.
And the other one doesn't relate to that at all. My neighbor turned it off for quiet the rest of the time. The other one is thank you to your staff for running the membrane plant, the RO, reverse osmosis plant. I just like to reiterate a thought that at some point soon, we ought to consider naming that plant for the person that the commissioner that pushed very hard for us to get that and for it to be designed with extra capacity. There's a lot of, if I'm not mistaken, it could something like double, maybe even more than.
Yes, double. It could double relatively economically.
Right. And that's Commissioner Joanne Golden. So I would like us to consider naming at some point.
Okay.
Sure, I'll work with the city manager as far as putting a proclamation together and we can always get a plaque made. Not an issue. I knew Commissioner Golden very well.
Mhm.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second? All in favor?
All right.
Hi.
Very good, thank you.
Thank
Next-
you.
Thank you. Next up, might as well stay there, is the agreement with US Peroxide LLC doing business as USP Technologies for hydrogen sulfide control services.
Similar to the last item, this is also a piggyback contract. We annually contract with USP to do hydrogen peroxide addition into our collection system at key locations to keep down the hydrogen sulfide, which is the rotten egg odor you get from wastewater decomposition. So they've been doing a good job for many, many years for us. So we'd like to keep them on board and piggyback the city of Orlando contract where we get good pricing from them. And you'll see again, this is fiscal years 23 and 24.
Motion to approve.
Madam Clerk, are there any public comments in any of these? I don't want to forget anyone if they
No, we have comments for the next item, but and that's the only item.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Commissioner Stokes. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you
Thanks.
all.
Great. Moving on to C, item C, the Electric Utility Integrated Resource Planning Process Presentation and Discussion. Mr. Liberty, do you have a presentation?
Yes, I do. I'll lead with a few comments and then I'm going to introduce our friends at Horizons Energy who will be conducting this integrated resource plan, and they'll walk us through a slideshow.
Thank you.
To provide an entree into what this is all about. And what is a resource plan and what is an integrated resource plan? So in 2018, we kicked off our first resource plan. And the resource plan is simply a look ahead, usually 10 to 20 years, but minimum of 10 years, at what power generation or electric generation resources we would need. And that takes into account what's happening in the technology world. It takes into account economics, natural gas prices or alternative fuel prices, where our load is expected to go in terms of load growth or shrink or stay flat, where our peak demands are likely to go. So in 2018, we produced that first report. At that point, we didn't have one, and a number of things were changing for us. Our infrastructure was much older. It was in a relatively unknown condition with regards to what the commission knew of its condition. We didn't have plans for a second tie line. And now we have things that have changed since the 2018 plan. The 2018 plan, for example, put together by Horizons Energy, together with power engineers and our own staff, identified solar as a key resource that we should pursue in the range of about 25 or 26 megawatts, something like that. We subsequently went ahead with 36 megawatts of solar because the pricing was so attractive, and now we're underway with the second tie line. So two of the key things that were identified in that plan are in fact underway, but things continue to change over a 4-year period, so it's time to refresh the plan. That first plan, if you notice the nuance, I said resource plan. The first plan did not look at demand side resources. It only looked at supply side resources, meaning that we were focused on what power plants, what resources we were to add, as opposed to what conservation measures might be possible. What we're asking for in this plan is for it to be expanded to take into account demand side resources. And Horizons is going to get into this in a few minutes. I'm just setting the stage for how that plays in. So they're going to help us come up with the optimum mix. And the optimum mix isn't always economically driven. Sometimes it's aspirational things that we want to do. So for example, we may in fact want to go even further with solar. And I would suggest that we most likely will, especially with FMPA Solar 3 under evaluation. So we're taking a look at that. But Horizons will lead us through this exercise and help us come up with a better plan that we can pursue. So at this point, I see Greg Turk on the screen. So I'm going to turn it over to Horizons to walk us through some slides and introduce you to the subject, which could be rather complicated, as you'll see.
I have
We
a
have-
quick question. Is this the same company who brought forward the plan in 2018?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so they're just revising and giving us better direction for the future and for now.
Correct.
Thank you.
That's a very good question. You say, well, why the same company? Because they've done such extensive modeling on our system and the Florida Peninsula electric system and market prices that it made a lot of sense to have them dust that off. And I don't know their full list of their clients, but I suspect they're doing work for other clients in Florida as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner McVoy, is your light on for a
Yeah.
reason?
Yeah, my light on is definitely on for a reason. This is one of the most important discussions and decisions that we make relative to the electric utility. So I will definitely have questions and some suggestions for my colleagues here. Have we already made a decision on who is going to write our integrated resource plan?
Yes, Horizons Energy, who's presenting tonight. So we have already retained Horizons, and we have not yet kicked off the work. So tonight's purpose is to introduce you to the fact that we have retained them
Okay.
and they're going to be kicking off this exercise.
I want to commend you
Mhm.
on bringing forward the idea of an integrated resource plan and moving on that, getting us moving on. That's great. However, I want to be very clear that integrated resource plan sounds, who knows what it is? You got to do some research on it before you figure it out. That is what sets the direction of what we want to do with our utility. And we as a commission, that's a policy document, very much a policy document. The decision of who writes that policy document and who is contracted to do that needs to be a policy decision made by the policy board. It should not be a done deal that's being presented to us. It's already happened. That's why you have a policy board, because as we think about an integrated resource plan, it makes no sense to ask a technical agency to write that without a clear sense of what is the mission that the policy board wants for the electric utility. What are the things that we want to optimize for? The industry, as you've pointed out, is changing drastically, both in terms of technology and in terms of business models. We need to make sure that we as a commission, before we get the cart ahead of the horse, we need to make sure that we have had a serious, robust discussion among ourselves to come up, what is our mission? What do we want our publicly owned, resident-owned utility to accomplish? Obviously, we want reliable power and some other things, but there are a lot of other objectives that we have available to us that somebody who would just buys their power from an investor-owned utility that they don't have. And so I would say, let's hear the presentation, but I think we need to have some discussion among ourselves is, are we ready to simply move forward without having had those discussions of mission, objectives, get that on paper so that whoever we hire to do it knows where we want to go.
Were they under contract in 2018?
Yes, they were.
And when, is this was this contract still valid or did?
No, it was a new issue and it met the criteria for signature by the city manager, I believe. So that's how we proceeded. So I don't want to make sure that there's no misunderstanding here. What Horizons will be doing is working with us. So they're not going to go off into a closet, into a dark space and write a plan and say, here's what you need to do. This is an iterative process. So there'll be discussions with us going back and forth, but there are key elements of understanding market drivers in terms of technology maturity, cost structure, where natural gas prices might go. I think you'll get a better idea of that. So they're not here to dictate to us what their own particular pet project might be. It's to lay that groundwork. There's going to be plenty of opportunity for discussion back and forth and help guide that. So, for example, we understand that low carbon footprint is a very important thing for us. So you'll see in their criteria, in their study, that there'll be criteria around lowest carbon footprint. There'll be criteria around cost. So it's a wide path. And then from that, you narrow down the guidance and ultimately you come up with the ultimate plan that you want. So you need somebody to guide you through that macroeconomic evaluation of what's possible.
I understand that, but typically when a policy board needs advice in a technical area, what one does is spell out what are the objectives that the policy board has, put together an RFP, and then evaluate who out there in the technical world or policy technical combination is got a proven record of being able to provide the policy that the policy board wants. We are not at that stage. We've had a discussion, I believe Commissioner Stokes mentioned it at a previous utility meeting. We should have some sort of workshop to figure out what objectives we have here in the community.
Well, I think though, in all fairness, if you listen to what they have to say, I don't think you'll find that the modeling and the guidance that they'll provide and the forums that they'll provide would somehow, invalidate what you'd like to do.
Is this?
I think it works pretty well with what you're talking about.
Is this something that should have went out for an RFP like Commissioner McBoy is alluding to, or is this something that was done in the privy of the way we're supposed to do it?
Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
I appreciate the comments from Vice Mayor McBoy. Certainly in our moving forward with the integrated service resource plan, we knew that that was a desire of the commission to update that. And Mr. Liberty and I spoke to that, trying to bring this forward as an update. So it was my understanding that from our perspective, to fulfill the desire of the commission to update the resource plan, that we move forward with the vendor or the professional services group that provide the last one. And their intent is, as Mr. Liberty said, and my understanding was to get the thoughts and ideas and the direction from the commission and then articulate that through a resource plan and guide us through that process. But certainly, if there's some other desires, we're open to hear it.
So just so that I understand, they would be meeting with us as commissioners?
That would certainly be an option to be a part of the process. So I just I'm getting a sense that there's some feeling that we somehow shopped for somebody who would give us the answer that we wanted.
Yeah.
And we didn't do that.
Right.
And I don't think you'll see that there's any sign of that when you hear Horizons present. They're looking and taking into account all ranges of options that should be pursued. And then the best one to be pursued is the one that you all as policymakers want to pursue, which is the way that we did the last plan, which said, hey, go strong on solar. And actually we went beyond the recommendation, went even further because prices came down so dramatically.
Commissioner Lang?
So
My
I don't
question
think there's-
has this been done legally according to the way it should have been done, hiring this said organization to do the plan that we have all inquired on? Did we do it the right way? Are we going to get in trouble? Is there another way that we should have done this? Like, is Commissioner McVoy does he have genuine concerns for the legality?
No, I
Or
did
is
not
it-
raise the concern.
No, I have the floor, sir, staying away. Did we do this legally? Did the city manager and the director of the utilities department, who I thoroughly trust his expertise, bring us the right person in the right way? Or should this have gone out to an RFP with a list of recommendations or of what those requirements would be from that company?
There's nothing wrong with the way that it has been brought forward. It certainly could have gone out to RFP. That is an option that it could have gone through, but it was not required.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll add that in 2018, they were selected pursuant to an RFP.
And if I might, what is the rough approximate size of the contract?
As far as the cost,
50,000.
yeah, I was looking at the document.
So it's right at the limit of what we give discretion.
Yeah.
I'm not raising an issue of legal or not. That doesn't interest me. I mean, obviously, we don't want to do something illegal, but that wasn't my concern. My concern is, and I've been on the applying side of where municipalities, governments need services done. They spell out up front. The policy board is involved in that spelling out. These are the services we want. Here's our mission that we want for that part of the organization. And then you put it out for an RFP, and different organizations will have maybe similar expertise, but they have different flavors at it. That's something that we then evaluate.
But that's
And
why the city manager has a threshold and power as a city manager. She's heard direction from us on what we want. And I don't see why we just don't go forward with the presentation and give them the guidance that they're asking for.
I was going to suggest that we watch the presentation and take it from there.
we can watch it. I'm extremely uncomfortable that we would move forward with not even a choice in the organization that's doing it, and not a robust discussion as a policy board of what directions do we want to go, and then we choose who to help us get there.
Let's watch the presentation. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. You guys can hear me and you can see a slide that says integrated resource plan in front of you, correct?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Madam Mayor, Commissioners, and City Manager, as the Director provided a pretty thorough introduction, we were retained some weeks ago to provide a refresh of a resource plan that we developed in 2018 for Lake Worth Beach. So our agenda for this evening is to discuss Horizons Energy, our credentials, and our experience in doing this kind of work. We're also going to step through and define what an integrated resource plan or an IRP is, and discuss the various components of it. We will describe how, taking it from a general concept, how we look to apply it for Lake Worth Beach for this 2022 cycle of the IRP. Along the way, we will draw contrasts, some of which Ed Liberty alluded to in his introduction. We will also talk through our process for doing the IRP and present a timeline, a preliminary timeline that includes milestones as well as deliverables. And also along the way, we obviously want to answer any questions that you might have for the work that we look to do here. Okay, so Horizons Energy was established in Horizons Energy was established in 2016. Although the people working on this project have over 25 years of experience in market analytics, we have contributed to over 25 different integrated resource plans, and we maintain a client base of over 30 national clients. Our main services include the development of a national database. That is, we maintain a database of the entire North American power system. And we also provide a forward view of 78 different market areas within the North American footprint. Our final service is that we focus on consulting. We provide a variety of different consulting, including integrated resource planning, asset valuation, and stochastic evaluation. A key component in doing integrated resource planning is that we use a state-of-the-art power simulation model called Encompass. Encompass incorporates a variety of traditional planning problems in order to address resource expansion as well as system operation. That's provided by our sister company, Anchor Power Solutions. And the Encompass model is one of the most widely used tools in the industry for doing this work. The people working on this project will be Kathy Jones, who's also on the call this evening, and myself. We each have over 30 years of experience in resource planning and market evaluations. And by that, I mean power market and related markets. You look in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see within the last 2 years, our experience in working with different organizations to develop IRP and some similar type of projects. This year, we've worked with AES Indiana in the development of their forthcoming IRP. In 2021, we worked with the Nebraska Municipal Public Power Agency, and we worked with Public Service New Mexico. In 2020, we worked with Kentucky Municipal Electric. In the past, I've worked with the cities of Palo Alto, California, and Springfield, Oregon, and Kathy has worked with a number of cities within North Carolina. So what we do is we maintain that national database of power markets, including every generating unit in North America, a database of over 23,000 generators. We provide an outlook covering major market drivers that impact resource choice. It's a fundamental approach. We identify those factors that impact market decisions. Excuse me. And we develop those over a long forecast horizon, generally out decades, and across 9 highly structured scenarios. We also provide custom scenarios, but the point I want to make is with our work in the development of the national database and the North American advisory, that helps to supplement the work that we do for consulting and provides benefit for the development of a resource plan for the city. Okay, so an integrated resource plan. This is a definition from 1993 The key indicators I want to call out here is that it incorporates both supply side and demand side options. We'll talk about what that means in a minute. And it's also has an emphasis on providing energy services at either least cost or a cost that appropriately balance the interests of stakeholders. And that gets at what I believe to a certain extent, some of the discussion from earlier. So this is a process. I will second that what Director Liberty was saying, that this is intended to balance the interest of stakeholders. Just as an aside, this work came out in the out of the middle 1980s when electric utilities were coming forth with a number of projects that turned out to not be viable projects. And there was a movement towards used and useful standard within the state-based regulation industry. And from that came first least cost planning. I wrote the original rules for the state of Indiana for the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission for the least cost planning process, which became the IRP process, and have watched the problems and the interactions with stakeholders evolve over time. So we look and state that we look to develop a plan for Lake Worth Beach Electric Utilities to allow, and these are stated goals that we saw on your website, goals of providing low cost and reliable power while maintaining low carbon service. Again, I want to emphasize that we're using Encompass, and the reason that we use this planning model is because it's large and integrated. It incorporates all the different aspects, including things like carbon, the desire for additional carbon, or the desire for greater use of RPS. And it further incorporates the notions of optimization, of timing of resources, type and timing of resources, and it provides a kind of an unbiased, neutral ability to identify these best plans given the assumptions that are injected into them. When we do an integrated resource plan, we start with a demand forecast. The demand forecast is that hourly demand for every hour of the year, and then across years. So on the left-hand side, we show an hourly demand forecast for 8760 hours. The daily variability is as we see in industry, is quite apparent here. And then on the right-hand side, what we see are a variety of across time, a variety of scenarios where the base case scenario is in the middle, and then we drive a high and low demand scenario. That's one example of the uncertainties that we look to provide. And so the goal of the integrated resource plan, one of them is to make sure that we meet demand on an hourly, weekly, monthly, and annual basis. So that goes to both the reliability as well as the deliverability of energy services. One thing that we know has a level of interest and plays well in the development of resource plans today is to evaluate electric vehicles. This particular slide shows us the penetration by county of electric vehicles in 2021. And we can see a stronger penetration in West Palm County. And we look to work with the utilities division to incorporate the electric vehicles as one aspect in the development of the demand forecast. Excuse me. So we talked about that an integrated resource plan is a demand forecast, And then we incorporate demand and supply side resources. Examples of demand side resources include demand response, where either the utility has the ability to interrupt or provide price signals to consumers as a means of reducing demand at critical times. Energy efficiency in general is doing the same amount of work with less energy. And down below here, we have a graph that illustrates meeting different levels of energy reduction. This is a large DOE study that was performed. And what we see is we have cost versus the amount of savings. And what we find is that there are a set of programs that may be available, oftentimes are required in order to meet building codes, things like residential lighting and meeting required retrofits in the commercial and industrial sector. This builds up and has diminished returns as we go and look at other types of programs. So the key is to identify cost, ability to reduce energy across a range of programs for energy efficiency. Behind the meter, we look to incorporate a behind the meter as an explicit resource in this resource plan. And on the right-hand side, what we're showing you is the percent increase in behind the meter generation for the investor-owned utilities within the state of Florida from 2017 to 2021. It went up 620%. And we see that Lake Worth Utilities went up 502% over that same time period. So that's the demand side. The other side is supply side.
That's different. I have to interrupt you. On
Sure.
our chart that we have, that second one with the bars, that's quite different.
Yeah.
There's a 16% total IOU, 83% total municipal, and then Lake Worth Utility, 357%. So we don't really know what we're looking at.
Right.
We can provide you the source. So this is the percent change in behind the meter generation from one year, 2017, to another year, 2021. It's not intended to be the relative amount of behind the meter generation of different entities.
Yeah, but they're not
Hey,
even close.
hey,
the
Yeah,
percentages.
it's a
Yeah,
completely-
Greg,
Oh,
we're
oh,
looking at the we're looking at the PowerPoint slides, which came in ahead of time.
I'm sorry.
There's a
I apologize.
yeah,
we-
our page 9 is different than the page 9 that you're currently showing.
I apologize, commissioners and mayor. We actually went through and identified that we made an error in the calculations and recalculated them and are presenting the updated values here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so so these are the demand side. That's sort of one half of the resources that are available and resources that we did not incorporate in the 2018 study. On the supply side, we spend significant time identifying the existing system, the existing generation and contracts of Lake Worth Beach, and they include the in-city generation of Tom G. Smith, the ownership shares of Stanton St. Lucie, both the owned generation and ownership shares of solar, and significant purchases from OUC. We also, so what we'll do is we'll get information, and we've started this process with Brian King and Ed Liberty to get a data transfer so that we can incorporate this data into our Encompass Power Planning model. We'll also incorporate new options into the resource plan, the cost of solar, battery, potentially combustion turbines, and we hope to be able to use real world purchase power agreement pricing as one means of generating the resource plan. If there's a bidding process in place, oftentimes it's valuable to have both purchase power agreements as well as assuming owned generation.
Hey, Greg, this is Ed. Let me jump in for a second to highlight some things here. So there's some things that are changing. All right, change is coming upon us as in everything else. So if we look at this list of resources, what has changed? Well, TG Smith plant, that's elements within our plant, are 4 years older than they were 4 years ago, and they were already very old back then. So our newest asset there is a 1975 to 1978 asset, and the older ones date to the early 60s. So we had contemplated that some of those assets, we really have to plan for the end of their life. We already know that Stanton, that's our coal unit, that's going to be retired by the end of 2025, right? So when that happens, 11 megawatts of our capacity and X amount of megawatt hours that comes out of that of our energy will go away. So we need to look at the resources plan and say, okay, so if you're losing 11 megawatts of capacity and you may retire some of the oldest stuff within the existing power plant, how are you going to replace that capacity? Hence why you need a resource plan, right? And it needs to be an integrated resource plan. So let's just do some easy math. Let's just look at Stanton. Stanton, 11 megawatts of coal. We should not automatically think that we're going to replace 11 megawatts of coal energy and capacity with another 11 megawatts of energy and capacity. Maybe it's going to come, maybe some portion of that 11 is going to come from demand side options. So not 100% supply side. So I see some puzzled looks. So let me explain a concept here. Let's go back to early math. I know not all of you are math fans, but at some point we all discovered that there were negative numbers as well as positive numbers, right? So a megawatt of generation is a new power source that we add, or a power source that we add that produces a megawatt or a kilowatt of power. A negawatt, which is a negative watt, is a demand side option where we reduce the demand. So if we can reduce the demand by 1 megawatt for the same price or less or value as we produce 1 megawatt of supply, that's a wash. The question is, how do we produce a negative watt, right? We produce that through conservation.
Okay.
Whether it's demand response by actually proactively turning off customers' equipment who have enrolled in a program, or in promoting technologies to customers that actually reduce their demand. So we don't need to fill the entire 11 megawatts with 11 megawatts of new supply, physical stuff in the ground. We're getting the integrated resource going. We also know that we went beyond the 25 plus megawatts or so that were recommended. We took 36 and a half, and there's some really attractive options to grab even more in FMPA Solar 3. Not only because it's green, but also because it's a great physical hedge against rising fuel prices into the future. So what this study will help us do is help understand at what price of natural gas would you have been better off having invested in more solar, for example, or in more demand response. So those things become physical hedges against a real market probability. As we all know, natural gas prices today are between 6.5. I think they close at about $6.52 today for the July contract, and have been up as high as $9 and change. So that changes the whole world of economics for these technologies. So we have things that are changing in our own system. And then every year we add between 0.5 to 0.75% of new load, meaning more customers using more energy. So the need for power is going up, and some of the resources that we have counted on since the 1980s are going away in a good way. It's good for the coal to go away, right? And be replaced by more solar. But what's the right mix going forward? So I think you'll see as you go through here that Horizon's energy job is not to come in here and dictate our own social policy or economic policy or environmental policy. It's to help us create the roadmap so we can weigh various decision-making ideas, right? So I'll turn it back over to Greg to keep going.
That's helpful, actually. Yeah.
Thank you, Ed. So we've talked through that we have an integrated resource plan in which we start with a demand forecast. We have supply side options and demand side options, and then we're going to utilize this Encompass Power Planning model. I'm bringing it up again because number one, it's a state-of-the-art tool, and number two, what it does is it allows us to have this unbiased view in order to measure both the costs, the capital costs, and the value of capacity of bringing a resource on the system or potentially retiring an alternative program, the ability to embed environmental programs or renewable portfolio programs within the database, capture the details of variable energy resources, the ability to commit and dispatch resources such as Tom Smith, and interact with external markets. We do all these steps in order to come up with the resource plan across multiple decades while still maintaining an hourly level of simulation detail to measure the economics of fuel costs and costs into market and costs of new projects and potential opportunity costs of retirement potentially. Okay, so I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes talking at a high level about our ability to have a reasoned background on the various drivers that will impact the resource plan. This again falls out of our work in developing our advisory service. So in the advisory service, essentially what we're doing is twice per year for the entire North American footprint, 78 different market areas, we simultaneously develop 78 different integrated resource plans from the year 2022 through 2050. And then we provide the results of those to subscribers of our service. So we provide this entire market area level of detail, but then we can zoom into and we maintain coverage of portions of the different areas, or what we call the market areas within that large footprint. So Florida, starting in 2020, I believe became part of CERC. The Florida Peninsula did. It's one of 6 reliability areas. So my point is we're maintaining a national view, we maintain a regional view, and then we maintain a view right down to the Florida Peninsula for purposes of creating large scenarios that identify plausible futures for the electric utility industry and consequently the impacts on Lake Worth Beach. So here we're looking to do another resource plan within this larger resource planning footprint. In order to do that, Ed alluded to this a little bit, a major driver of both energy prices and value of capacity in the state of Florida are natural gas. It's a very large percentage of the total generation. The basis price at which it's traded is Henry Hub. And what I'm illustrating here is this is years by price. So what we're showing is there's a base price of natural gas that we forecast out over time. This is based on our work as well as work of a group called Natural Gas Intelligence. And then we bound that with a high and low demand forecast, or I'm sorry, market forecast for the Henry Hub. So the high price of Henry Hub is here and the low price here. This gives rise to changes in energy prices and gives rise to changes in the relative economics of different resources in the resource plan. We do a similar thing on we call this overnight capital costs. It's the construction cost of new resources on the system. We're looking at a wide variety of technologies. Here we're showing the capital costs associated with things like batteries, solar, and then conventional resources such as combined cycle generation turbine and ICs. And we apply this as a means of having an understanding of where markets in the future will go, both with respect to conventional technologies as well as emerging technologies. So what this is showing us is that we forecast based on our research and the research of others, including the National Reliability Lab and EIA and Bloomberg New Energy Finance and others, that we expect that the emerging technologies will decline in capital costs over time. And whereas conventionals will increase over time, there are crossover points of economics occurring all the time in different markets. And this is one of the reasons why. So when we do this, we're doing over this whole time frame, we're capturing the long-term cost streams, and we're present valuing them back to make a present value decision of one resource type versus another. I'd like to quickly show one more slide on markets, and that is PPA prices. These are PPA prices from late 2018 or early 2019 through
What is a PPA?
purchase power agreement. It's an agreement between two parties one party generally agrees to buy power at a certain schedule, maybe around the clock or maybe only on peaking hours from another buyer. And oftentimes there are terms and conditions that can be arbitrarily complex, but generally a purchase power agreement is where the seller sells to the buyer for so many dollars per megawatt hour for a schedule of energy over a defined period of time.
Thank you.
Sure. So purchase power prices, this is provided to us from a company called Level 10. The headline here is starting in first quarter of 2020 for 10 years, these key technologies like wind and solar saw declines. Starting in first quarter of 2020 and going forward, we're seeing increases in the costs of those technologies. This is due to supply chain constraints. It's one of the complexities of the current marketplace, similar to what Ed was alluding to is occurring in the natural gas marketplace, where we've had unprecedented, brand new levels, high levels of market volatility in natural gas. We're seeing similar things in providing the ability to buy and sell wind, solar, and also batteries. This gives us a little bit of the geographic viewpoint of so the different regions that are represented here. The Cal ISO is California, ERCOT is Texas, MISO is the Midwest, PJM is the East Coast, and so on. Anyway, the point is prices are going up significantly, and we look to incorporate PPAs, if possible, that are currently being traded in the Florida area, hopefully in the southeastern Florida area today to get market relevance. So that's talking about some of our market drivers. Quickly, when we do this analysis and the analysis that we did in 2018, we don't just do one case, we do it under a variety of cases. Why? So that we can see how much resource plans change under aspects of uncertainty. Uncertainty is a big driver or big component of integrated resource plans today. So we're going to do this under a base case, a variation of natural gas, of demand, and then we have quite a few scenarios that we do around different manifestations of carbon. Our carbon limit is the Paris Climate Accords, national carbon tax is EIA's $15 carbon, and so on. So we look at it under a variety of conditions. We utilize a tool called a scenario matrix. I'm going to go through this very fast. The columns of the scenario matrix are those scenarios that I showed in the previous graph, and the rows here are the market drivers, those things that give rise to the difference between a reference case and a CO2 high NG case and a zero carbon additions case. So we create highly structured, complex, and plausible futures in order to see how much those resource plans might change under uncertainty. And then we also allow the Encompass Power Planning model to build out different resource mixes according to the relative economics of these drivers. Again, to my knowledge, this is state-of-the-art application of the concepts for the development of an IRP. And so we can take our advisory information and we can make it relevant to this particular study. This shows us in 2021, the generating mix of Florida. The orange here is combined cycle natural gas generation, and the yellow is combustion turbine. And this is a percentage of total megawatts. So almost all the megawatts in the system today are either combustion turbine or combined cycle. That drives the marginal cost of energy. It also drives resource choice economics. And then the rest of the columns here are looking at an out year, in this case 2050, and how those relative resource changes mix changes under these different conditions. So I'm just going to call out one really quickly or two. The zero carbon additions case is one of our most extreme cases. It essentially eliminates carbon by 2050 for North America. And you can see that the combined cycles almost entirely go away. And then photovoltaic in this dark blue and batteries is blue, lighter blue, take up a significant portion of the resource plan, as contrasted with a low LNG, which provides viability over the long run to our natural gas generators.
So Greg, this is Ed. Let me ask a question, which I know some folks may be thinking.
Mhm.
This does not recognize yet the evolution of hydrogen extraction as a fuel source for combined cycle. My assumption is if hydrogen became a viable technology, we would see the combined cycle stay high because it'd be on hydrogen fuel. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes. And in fact, hydrogen, much like other technologies that are outside of our the purview of technologies that we evaluate, we simply they are generally at this point in time are eliminated as a screening procedure. We can simply say they will not be in the resource plan. Alternatively, we could include them, but I can tell you with a very high degree of confidence until the price of carbon the price of hydrogen comes down, that that technology will not be viable. We could do sensitivities if there was an interest in, and we can model hydrogen, both the creation of the fuel as well as utilization in combined cycles and combustion turbine technologies. But we would tend to make that a sensitivity on the cost of hydrogen in an alternative case.
So the benefit for us is that hydrogen is going to be explored in the state by one of the probably the single largest producer of energy in the state. So if hydrogen does take off as a viable fuel, we would benefit from that indirectly as a power purchase agreement customer, because that fuel would then be in the marketplace. I don't envision that it would become so economic that we could build a hydrogen unit at the size that would make sense for Lake Worth Beach within a 10-year planning horizon. I bring these things up because resource plans are living, breathing documents. You just don't put them on the shelf and say, I'll revisit it in 10 years. You really want to look at these things every few years. As a small utility, we don't have to look every year. The large utilities do look every year, but we should be doing ours every 2 to 4 years. And we're at the 4-year cycle now to take a look at this.
How
So
long are our contracts usually for? So when these are going to help, I think they're definitely very critical right before we make long-term decisions. So if we look at these every 2 to 4 years, but how long are we locking ourselves into various contracts typically?
So I'll give you, those are very good questions. So when it involves a physical asset with ownership, let's say, for example, St. Lucie nuclear unit and the Stanton coal unit, those are basically the life of plant. So we entered into those in the mid 80s, and St. Lucie's mortgage is now paid off, and the Stanton mortgage is now paid off, and it's approaching the end of its life for both economic and environmental reasons by the end of 2025. St. Lucie, however, is going to go through at least 2043, and I believe they're intending to file for an extension to go well beyond 2043. Let's go at the other end of the spectrum. Our power purchase agreements, or they're referred to as power purchase agreements, but because that's in fact what they act like for solar, with FMPA Solar 1 and Solar 2. Those are 20-year contracts. One is a flat price, same price on year 1 as it is in year 20, and the other is slightly escalating at about 1 or 2% per year in terms of cost. FMPA Solar 3 would, if we do take a piece of that would be an escalating contract. Our contract with OUC for supplemental, meaning they fill in the blanks between what we own and otherwise have under contract and what we need, right? They make up about 50%. That contract total term was about 7 years with a number of off ramps after year 4, year 5, year 6. So we just, with your approval, it extended for year 4 to 5. So there are varying degrees. When you get into building assets, and we talked about the overnight capital number, if you're going to build an asset, you're going to have that project for the minimum of 20 years and likely 30 or more years. So when you enter into something that's really that long, you kind of eliminate your flexibility a little bit to react to some new emerging technology. So you want to evaluate that very closely. Most of the stuff that we're looking at, certainly solar, is coming in these 20-year tranches. Now, it doesn't mean that solar will stop working at the end of the 20th year. It means that that's when our contract with that project ends. It'll still produce power, and there may be a subsequent contract at a different price at that point, but they go 20 years.
And that will be renegotiated at 19 years or.
Right. And then other things may have something that may be tied to the life. So, for example, there may be some demand side technologies that realistically only have maybe a 3 to 10 year life. So you would only plan on that as an obligation for that short period of time.
Okay. I see a couple lights on, so we'll go Commissioner Diaz.
Okay, so in terms of like the years and the goals and especially the 2050 goal, I'm just curious, what agency, if at all, state or federal, that sets like guidelines for the IRP? Is there?
You do. This is owner's decision.
Okay, so there's not like.
There may be a national policy or something like that where it comes down and says, thou shalt be at this particular level by these
Right.
dates.
Mhm.
But pretty much you, as our policymakers, and the boards that will follow you over many, many years from now, right,
Mhm.
will set the guidance on where you want to go in terms of what you want your portfolio to look like, what your carbon goals are. That's why it is important to kind of understand up front, well, what is our carbon goal? We haven't talked a lot so much about carbon goals. We've talked about solar and being carbon free. So today, with the contracts that are already in place, not all of the energy has started to flow yet, but we're on track to be in the range of 55+% carbon free by 24-25 time frame, which would put us at a 50% reduction versus our 2005 level. What we want to look at is say, should we be doing more? And I think the answer is yes, right? My recommendation is yes, but we need to understand that, well, at what price and what does that look like? And how does demand conservation play into the mix? So if we need to add, let's say 11 more megawatts of capacity by the end of 2025 to make up for the retirement of Stanton, should that all come from supply or should be a demand side component? I don't think there's any way we could realistically get all of it through demand side reductions. That'd be saying, hey, we're going to take 10% of our peak, for example, or 8% of our peak and satisfy that through demand response. I think a demand response number might be closer to 1% or 2%, depending on the cost and how many people actually adopt it into their homes. But we have to accommodate that within a resource plan. And you're also going to be the drivers. You could say, hey, we want to be at 75% or 80% carbon free by 2030 or 2035. That's part of the judgment that will go into determining what this model ultimately looks like and what the answer is, and the contracts that we then go seek.
So EPA or no agency sets like goalposts or anything that says the IRPs have to.
No, they could set a national policy for carbon reduction and drive that with a price of carbon for a carbon trading scheme, a cap and trade type of thing. Or there may be some national policy that says, hey, we must all be at X% by a certain date. Or the Florida legislature could say, we want to be at 0% carbon by a certain date, and you have to react to it. But you have a lot of latitude in what you do.
Okay, I just want to clarify today, we're not being asked to take any action tonight.
None whatsoever.
Purely
This is
informational.
informative. This is really kicking off a dialogue of exchange that'll go into producing the ultimate product.
Okay, so the next step would be then what with this program?
Well, we have a few more slides to go through, but then staff will begin to share data later this week or next week with Horizons on what we've done in the last 4 years in terms of our load growth, number of customers, megawatt hours that we're sending out, the number of solar installations, megawatts installed, contracts that we have, market prices, things like that.
Will commissioners have the opportunity to speak with them individually?
Absolutely. I don't see why not.
Okay. So I just want to clear that we're not taking any action tonight, and we will have plenty of time for questions. Commissioner Malega.
So I'm looking at these wonderful graphs and charts and such, and I'm really saddened that I don't see Gulfstream current energy being harnessed. And we had a presentation here, I want to say 6 months ago. We were all on board and said, yes, we want to move this project forward. So if we're
That's
putting the
FAU.
energy, what's that?
It's FAU.
Great, but if we're going to put the energy into this study, I would really like us to try to marry that, because if we have this amazing source of energy, literally right at the end of our own pier, I would like to figure out how we can take that and put this into our plan and bring that to fruition, because we've been kicking that can and talking about it for years in this city. And if we're really going to look at the year 2050, I mean, if that's not enough time, then we're really in trouble.
Along those lines, I was hoping that we would get an update from FAU. It's been quite a while since.
It's been
we've
about
heard
6
from them.
months.
Yeah, at least, yeah.
So I'm questioning if this was done back in 2018, and I knew that the current commission back then was talking about it. It wasn't obviously put into the plan back then.
Mhm.
What do we do to get it into the plan now moving forward? And how do we start to move that needle and make that come to fruition for the city of Lake Worth Beach?
So that's a good question. Let me attempt to answer it. Ocean current energy is at such a level of infancy that it is barely a blip as an emerging technology. The projects that have happened to date have been largely test projects in the kilowatt range as opposed to megawatt range. The effort that we're underway with together with FAU is attempt to get some funding to create a test bed for development of future technology off of our shore, which could someday produce energy. It would be very difficult to have mention of that in a very meaningful way in a study like this, because we don't know what it will cost. Because nothing of commercial, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, no commercially viable units have yet been entered into the market. So we don't know what size will be viable, nor what price they would be at, nor what the cost to interconnect it to the shoreline would be. So it's something that we aspire to. We should certainly continue to pursue it, to try to get money to develop that underwater lab, if you will. But to try to count on that as a resource in the next 10 years is very, very difficult. Because when you make a decision to do option A, you've eliminated the decision to do option B, because you've said, I'm going down this path. And if that technology doesn't come to fruition, let's say at a 5 megawatt range in 10 years, but you planned on it, that means that you decided to not do something else that you could have done, which would come sooner. So I'm not saying that we would rule it out of the plan. We definitely have to have it in there, but it's a very speculative developmental technology at this point. Like I said, we can't quantify the size nor the cost.
Okay, but like the mayor said, where are we? I mean, 6 months ago, we said, yes, let's move forward. We're from what I hear, what you just said is we're looking for money.
We're still looking for money. FAU is still looking for money to fund the effort to get that test lab built.
Oh, good.
And they're hopeful that in this current funding cycle out of Washington that they could achieve that. But they've been hopeful for a long time, and so have we, right? And I talked with Gabe about this literally about, I think about 3 weeks ago. And they're hopeful that there's going to be some dollars in this next round out of DOE to support it.
Thank you.
McBoy?
And I'll just follow on to what Ed said and say, I very much agree with his analysis. We went up together and looked at the Harbor Branch facility. They're clearly smart people. They have spectacular labs and boats and all the things to test it. It also is a huge source of energy in the sense that you've got, and it's steady, which is different from solar and wind. So it's very appealing. The problem comes in that after 10 years of work, they were quite excited to run for 24 hours, 2 turbines that were each about a kilowatt, if I remember right. For scale, our peak is 100 megawatts. So you're looking at 10 to the 5th times higher than 2 of those things. And they were about a meter diameter, each of those turbines, if I remember right, maybe a little more. So to get to 10 megawatts to replace the coal, you can do the math, how many of these things you'd have to, you'd have a fleet of them out there. Environmentally, is that going to fly? Are there other technologies? There are people there's several other labs that do ocean current stuff or ocean related power generation. The Hawaii one does it with temperature differences. There are people doing wave stuff, and the wave stuff is much higher energy and further along. That's commercially available. But what Ed says, that it's nice, and we should certainly support it because of our location as a test facility. Would you want to hold your breath for it for the next decade or 2 decades? I don't think so. I completely agree with Ed on that assessment. Should we support it? Yes. Are we going to see any serious use out of it? Highly unlikely.
There's some very good reading. I'd ask people just do a search of Bing or Google or DuckDuckGo or whichever your preference is. And there was a unit that was just tested in the Sea of Japan, I believe. I want to say it was about 100 kW, maybe less. And it's a massive unit, but it's a very interesting reading. The technology continues to evolve. Our hope here is to have that test bed built here, so folks who are developing these technologies around the world will come here to test it and demonstrate it and get it to commercial viability, then have it scale up. But again, it's just so far out there. We will have some key decisions, as I said, coming up by the end of 25, and we should make that decision sometime in 23. What are we going to replace the Stanton capacity with? Now, from and I say capacity and energy, I keep stressing two different products, right? We may need to contract for some more peaking capacity, which is available in the market. And the work that Horizons will do will help guide us on what that might be worth to us in our portfolio and in terms of what we would be willing to pay. But then we want to look at the energy component. So we want to replace the capacity that it represents, but we also want to get the energy. And here's why I separate those. So solar is our preferred option right now. I don't think anybody would say that's the wrong way to go, right? But solar is really not giving us a lot of capacity because it doesn't work at night and it doesn't work when the sun doesn't shine, right? But it gives us great energy when the sun is shining during the daylight hours. So you still need some amount of peaking, old-fashioned fossil turbine or battery energy storage to make up for it when on the days when the sun is not shining. We also have to remember that we have the obligation to serve. So even though we have customers who are choosing to do solar on their own, we still have the obligation to deliver energy to them on the days when the sun is not shining here and their system's not producing. So we still have to buy capacity to serve that load, right? We have that obligation to serve. We have to take all of those things into account. And that's why you need the complexity of a model like what Horizons provides. You saw interconnections, for example, to other states and other utilities, and you say, well, what do we care about what's happening up in the northern part of the state or the southern part? We're Lake Worth Beach. Our cost of power is driven by the wholesale power market in the state. So we need to understand, well, what effect do natural gas prices have and technology over the 10-year window or longer have on what that wholesale power is going to be, because that's going to drive our cost of power. And are there points where that cost of power may get so high that we would then say, you know what, we should build our own and look back to building our own? I think that's highly unlikely because we are capital constrained and resource constrained. The dollars that we can raise through debt, and we all talked about that recently, are better spent on improving distribution reliability than in building power plant generation assets, which are really a commoditized resource. Wholesale power is a commodity and will become even more of a commodity down the road. You just have to pick the flavor that you want, right? And it's important for us and for all of you to weigh in on what flavor you want. So we may come out of this and you may say, hey, you may affirm that, yes, we want to keep going solar. You may affirm that we want to have the demand side, but what percent would be reasonable? So we'll be looking to get that information. What percent should we strive for? And once we set that number, that's what we're going to drive to do at that cost. So it's going to have to perform, because by choosing option A and B, we've eliminated pursuing options C and D within the planning horizon.
Commissioner Stokes.
So when we're looking at all of this stuff and we're looking at the national scale, do we consider, I think you and I've talked about, if we over commit to solar, is there during like the summer months down here, is there enough of a demand for us to sell that back into the market? Like, do we look at those kinds of, that level of detail of what happens if we overbuy and we sell off our extra? Are we going to break even? Is that incorporated into these models?
It will be, and we're also doing that modeling with a crude, simpler way with our existing models that we have. For those of you that may not know, we've already committed to so much solar that there will be about 5 months during the year where there are hours during the day where we're producing more solar energy than we have a customer to deliver it to. That's not a huge problem because it's a relatively small amount on a big scale, and we're able to, we anticipate being able to sell that power into the market and recover some of our costs, if not all of our costs, or possibly in some natural gas cases, may even make money on it. However, when you look at the other 6+ months of the year, five to 6 months of the year, we need even more, right? So it's unlikely that we would be buying so much solar that we would have solar to sell during the summer. Right. It's likely that if we have solar to sell, it's going to be between the months of November through April, Mayish.
And that's when most of the country has a higher demand for energy.
Or in other parts of the state as well. We'd probably, the power that we sell will probably not leave the state.
Okay.
It would probably be consumed within the state itself. But what we are looking at, I know other commissioners and I have had this one-on-one as well, at what price? So how much are we willing to overpay for in a few months to get a great benefit in the other months? And we're running models right now at 5 and 10 and 15 megawatts of additional solar capacity under FMPA Solar 3, which you've all seen the public number. I'm viewing that at the moment as a physical hedge against natural gas prices rising even higher. And what we're going to try to back into is that what's the equivalent natural gas price that we will have hedged against by doing that. So I think that for us, physical hedges with technology that follow our values of clean energy and low carbon are better than, for example, entering into financial hedges.
Okay, do you think that we should continue with the slides?
Greg, you want to wrap up a few more slides? And
I'll jump to the, do 2 more slides to give you a sense of both process and timeline. So in terms of process, our steps for undertaking the study include gathering data, the things we talked about, existing resources, and then incorporating that information along with the demand forecast and additional information that we get on the demand side programs. We put that into the model. We then run the model out over the forecast horizon. We do a validation step to make sure that the values that we see and all the metrics, things like reliability and meeting environmental, are met. We then begin to identify for a base plan what the least cost option is for the city, and then we introduce our scenarios. So that's very quickly the process that we go through. Also quickly, our preliminary timeline for doing this work, we have right here is that our introductory meeting this evening is kind of the kickoff for the meeting. We have had discussions with the electric utilities group in which we started receiving information. I would hope that we, in the coming weeks, perhaps mid to later July, will be through the data validation steps. We will look for additional information on the demand side, including the demand side, the demand response options. When we have all that information available, we then go through our results of our preliminary scenarios. We present those. We generally present those to the stakeholders. We then get a refinement step and then have a final presentation. All along here, we're looking at documenting the inputs, the market drivers across scenarios, and the outputs. What are the plans? And a lot of the emphasis of the plan would be not just the long-term type and timing, but also a 1 to 5 year look ahead, something we call an action plan. So the deliverables will be finally a presentation and a report that summarizes the analysis. And with that,
thank you very much.
we'll conclude.
so when we get this report, it's a product of a lot of interaction back and forth and understanding the factors that drove that recommendation. However, that's not a static report that we say, okay, we checked the box, we did the report, they wanted it, so we did it, now throw it in the drawer. No, we live by it, right? And we reference it. And when something comes up, in our case, we did the study in 2018. By 2019, the FMPA solar projects came on the table. The first one, I think we might have already been contemplating when this was being done. But FMPA Solar 2 came on at a price that was so good that we said, hey, I know the report said to go to about, well, at the time, at about 25 megawatts, but at this price, we need to go even further. So we did. And we bounced that off of the commission at the time. We did a lot of one-on-one sessions and talked about it. And they said, yeah, let's go even further than we had anticipated in the research
document.
It can be, absolutely. You're not bound by it and say, okay, that's it. Your hands are tied and it's that way till the next 4 years, till you do the next report. It educates you on what's possible and what your alternatives are, but it's not in a sense locked down and binding it. You can't make a decision outside of it.
Okay.
It's our product.
Madam Clerk, I think there were public comments. I think you mentioned, were there any public comments for this one?
Yes, I have a bunch.
Okay.
Okay, the first comment is from Michael Beautyman, 2010 Notre Dame Drive. We ask that our utility purchase only electric vehicles and only those that use electricity from renewable sources. We ask that citizens be allowed to use the water wasted when fire hydrants are flushed. Thank you. Susan Gallo, 131 North Gulfview Road, number 3. As a lifetime environmental advocate, I am concerned about climate change. I want our power company to be the most forward-thinking on this issue as possible. Along those lines, electric cars make sense, but only if we charge them with renewable energy sources like solar power. Can storage be included in the plan so solar can be used later in the day? Power companies that I have used have a system where my home power consumption could be reduced during peak hours. I thought this worked well and should be included in our plan. Also concerned about sea level rise. Is something in the plan for that? Can the power company work with tree board and neighborhood associations to improve the tree canopy instead of only seeing trees as a problem? Is there a committed timeline to get this work done? This is most important. If you hire a consultant to help with this, it is clear that they must be forward thinking in these areas needing change. Beth Schrantz, 210 South M Street. I would like to see the city create a plan for resiliency and carbon reduction, including the expansion of the solar field on our landfill and the undergrounding of our power lines. Ted Brownstein, 1016 South Lakeside Drive. Madam Mayor, Commissioners, friends, for brevity and greener Lake Worth Beach utility, please add these 2 items to the city's plan. 1, remove restrictions on best energy efficient windows, especially from historic code. Please make the window tint issue entirely go away. 2, remove restrictions and encumbrances on new rooftop solar. Lower kilowatt buyback rate needed to support grid maintenance for net metering users. Deep thanks for your thoughtful consideration. Jill Carlin, 2381 Sunset Avenue, apartment 205. Lake Worth Beach can become the world leader with an integrated plan for living comfortably and safely through the climate warming crisis. We own our own utility, and thus we have the opportunity of few places to create an integrated, sustainable solution based on best practices implemented globally. We have yet to investigate how to free our citizens from an antiquated, dirty system to one in which our children can thrive. It must be done thoughtfully, immediately. We are woefully behind the curve. Goal, 0 carbon footprint by 2050, attainable with a plan. We could be using carbon capture methodologies now. The utility must be responsible, greatly increasing our Lake Worth Beach tree canopy and food forests. This must become a utility. As a shade tree decreases electric bill by 15%. Energy storage critical. Electric vehicle power source and storage important to do thoughtfully, not willy-nilly. My late husband, the father of environmental architecture, left me a legacy. I can help. I have presented broad visionary plans which can be broken down into details of how to move forward, freeing us from the traditional grid, changing our utility to thrive with a new circular, sustainable, burgeoning economy, allowing our independence while contributing to the well-being of our planet and humanity. Donna Kerner, 1012 North J Street. I'm very concerned about the very alarming threat of climate change and sea level rise, and cannot stress enough that our utility needs to take concrete steps to prevent it. We need an integrated resource plan that spells out goals, actions to be taken, timelines, and indicators to measure how these goals are being met. The city needs to hire a top-notch consultant with solid technical knowledge and a proven commitment to decarbonization to help draft this IPR. Whitley McGovern, 3506 Lodge Lane, apartment 227, Louisville, Kentucky. Virtual Peaker, this sounds like someone's looking for business. Virtual Peaker is a cloud-based software company. I'm not going to read it, just it's available, but it sounds like it's a solicitation, not a comment. Next is Ramsey Stevens. Honorable Mayor and Commissioners, I would just like to applaud all of you and our utility director for bringing forward this discussion about an integrated resource plan for our utility. An integrated resource plan has the potential to ensure our utility is both economically and environmentally responsible to generations to come by identifying fiscally prudent paths for us to encourage energy conservation and distributed generation in our city. Please do not waste this unique opportunity to ensure our utility helps move our entire community forward to a more sustainable future for us all. James Tebby, 15 South Gulfview Road. I am glad to see the city moving forward in an effort to save our environment. Sue Welsh, 1331 North Palmway. Please include storage into the integrated resource plan so that solar energy can be better harnessed. As electric vehicles become more widespread, do we have a plan to meet vehicular energy consumption with solar energy? We are a family who has transitioned from 2 gas vehicles to 1 gas and 1 electric low-speed vehicle. In the last year, I have seen a substantial increase of low-speed vehicles, golf carts, and micro electric mobility in our city, which is awesome and is surely shifting energy consumption. Please address safe roads for bicycling and micro electric mobility in this resource plan. Alternative transportation should be a top priority for our high-density coastal city. Stephanie Isaacson, 432 Wright Drive. Before we write an integrated resource plan, do we have a mission statement that clearly captures our city's environmental goals? I am very concerned about climate change. I want my utility to do our part in prevention. I support electric vehicles, but only if the charging is from renewable energy. Can we include storage into the integrated resource plan so that solar energy can be used later in the day? Ginny Powell, 224 North Palmway. I'm excited to hear that the city is developing an integrated resource plan. The plan should include things we can do on the front end to reduce the city's reliance on fossil fuel. This will show that the city is serious about climate change and sea level rise and committed to reducing residents' high electric costs. Consider the following. 1, expand our solar field and add battery capacity to store solar energy for use at a later time. 2, investigate the use of energy rebates to residents who are willing to have power turned off briefly during peak usage. 3, bring back energy audits to help residents understand where they may be able to cut back on electricity usage. 4, provide rebates for installing energy efficient doors and windows, new AC heating units, and washer dryers. 5, work with the city tree board to promote the use of shade trees and native plants. Shade trees planted in the right place can reduce energy bills. Thank you. Yamin Martinelli, 530 South L Street. Hello, I'm interested to hear some of the specific goals for Lake Worth utilities and areas in which we can slow down negative climate change. How do you plan to write an integrated resource plan without a baseline mission or direction our city is heading in regards to renewable energy? I appreciate the open discourse that topics such as climate change are being discussed. I would like more clarity when it comes to the direction and goals that the city is trying to tackle with this integrated resource plan. Thank you. Noam Brown, 1701 North D Street. I would like our city's utilities to take the serious ramifications of climate change into consideration when crafting our integrated resource plan. These include implementing a plan for our solar energy to be stored for later consumption, carbon reduction with a goal of net zero, addressing sea level rise, and increasing our tree canopy. And the last comment is from David Sims, 715 North L Street, apartment 5. Climate change is real and impacts us more severely as a coastal community. That is why I urge the commission to strongly consider steps we can take in our electric utilities integrated resource plan to do our part to reduce carbon dioxide emissions and mitigate climate change. I'm aware that our resources are limited, but I ask that commissioners explore approaches to increase our renewable energy generation and create energy storage capacity. That was the last comment.
Thank you very much. I think since we don't have action to do, can we move on? No? Okay, Mr. McBoy.
So I think we heard a lot from the public. I heard a fair amount of consistency, a lot of interest in climate change in the community. I suspect that's an underestimate of community interest in it from what I've heard over the years. From
Right.
people. Certainly an interest in renewable energy, interest in decarbonization, surprising amount of interest in both, to me, surprising storage and trees. All of that it sounds good and seems like it's consistent with a lot of the values that we've talked about here. I have the same concern that I stated at the beginning, that I don't know anything other than what I've heard in the presentation about Horizon Resources, Horizon Systems. They certainly have expertise. However, the typical procedure for a policy board, and as Ed indicated to Commissioner Diaz's question, an interesting aspect, at least in Florida, of us being a municipal utility is that we do not have a the guys up in Tallahassee, I'm familiar with the public service in Wisconsin is called the Public Service Commission. We do not have a statewide board that provides guideposts or guidelines of how we should move forward or how we should set rates. We are de facto the Public Service Commission. We set the policy of what we want to do. And the concern I raised before stands that I think we need to be more explicit and take some time to be explicit of what are our goals. We will certainly need some help, as Ed has pointed out. These are complicated decisions. They will, thank you. It's the next one that's got me. That one's okay. Gil's on it. Yep, thank you. That would be an energy, that would be a demand side reduction, I think. But I think we need to have some time to sort out what our goals are with some help, some technical expertise to, keep us from going off crazy directions. But the typical thing to do at that point is to have presentations just like we had from Horizon, but have them from several different applicants, same as we did with our advisory board, to say, hey, does it look like this company is going to be the best one to provide to meet the goals that we've spelled out, or does a different one? And what track record have they had in writing an integrated resource plan for different communities and achieving certain reductions or other objectives that are stated? So I'm quite uncomfortable that the decision has been made that is very much a policy decision is not being made by the policy board. I don't think that's the appropriate way to go.
But they already signed a contract.
Yeah, that's not what we're discussing tonight, actually.
Well,
Commissioner Diaz,
that could
Commissioner
be.
Diaz.
I kind of want to echo some of that because those comments, and there were a lot of really good and interesting comments. Earlier in the presentation, I think it was Mr. Liberty that described it as we want something that reflects the flavor, if you will, of what people want here. And I think those comments really, captured how creative this town wants to be in having a plan, an energy plan. Another part of the presentation, Mr. Liberty pointed out, we also need to look at demand, right? And it's kind of surprising to me that we've gone so many years without looking at the demand side of things. And some of the comments alluded to some really good things in what we can do, and what can we do for energy conservation? What can we do to lessen that demand? So it's great that we're taking a look at that first, and I just kind of want to point out that there's so many good ideas out there, and it's more than just, we've talked about load control technologies and things like that, and battery storage. That's a huge part of that as well. But, things even maybe beyond utility, things like our historic preservation, windows for sure are a big thing, our roofs, how can we help those kinds of improvements? Because I think that would take a big chunk, and I hope that is something that gets considered and is looked at in this plan. And my, question would be to Horizons would be, I know other municipalities across the country, they do have a process, or as part of their process, they do have opportunities for public input. And I'm just curious if that is, available and to our process if we go.
More than what we had tonight.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't have any, I don't think there's any issue with that.
There's none whatsoever. As a matter of fact, when we did the first resource plan, we did have public input. There were multiple presentations made to the commission and to the advisory board at that time.
Commissioner Malega, your light was on. Did you turn it off?
And I'll also point out that a study like this helps give you the ability to evaluate
The tools.
various carbon footprints that you want. So let's say, for example, you wanted to get to 0% by 2050. This could help you understand, well, what technology are you going to use to get there? What might that cost you to do that, right? What steps might you take along the way? Or do you want to get to 75% by 2030 or something like that? Something closer so we can see actually specific action. I tend not to like things that say, hey, 25 years from now, we're going to do some really good things. I'd rather see something that says 2 years from now, right? Or next year, we're going to see some really good things, right? Near-term things. But having a tool like this where you can model under various natural gas prices, which you're competing with, right? Wholesale prices, because ultimately you have to determine what premium are you willing to pay to have these additional things. And I'd say our community would be willing to pay more of a premium than other communities might. That's how we're wired, right? No pun intended, but that's important to us. So this will help us determine, well, if you want to do X% with carbon-free resources or Y% with demand reduction, what does that look like in your portfolio?
So public input would be part of this process.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in the prior process, we in fact did engage the public. We did it through the advisory board and through the commission.
Commissioner Stokes.
Yeah, I just have a few, because this is the time for our consultant, everybody to hear from us, our thoughts about the presentation. Just a few things I want to point out. I did have written down the role of our electric utility advisory board. I think it's important. I want to consider them a stakeholder, like we're stakeholders, and people in city staff are stakeholders, so they should be consulted throughout this whole process. Another thing, it does seem like this group has a lot of the expertise and the tools at their disposal to help us through it. I'd also like us to consider, and maybe have the advisory board consider other thought leaders in the industry to look at what they're saying and what they're doing. So whenever we start a new product where I work, we always consult multiple thought leaders in the industry, names that anybody in the business would know of, that this is what they're talking about right now, because I don't think all 5 of us know what all the thought leaders in this industry are saying right now. So I think if there's some way to get the that's why I think we have advisory boards, is to help do that work for us and present it to us in an easy way. I really would like to see all the milestones so if we did have a goal being carbon free by 2020, I agree with 2050. We're going to go back in
We're
time.
going backwards.
Not going back to 2020 at all.
I think it's really important to walk away from all this with the milestones and tracking against them throughout, and having many celebrations as we march towards our ultimate goal. I am curious if the advisory board or other members of the commission, I saw the custom scenario. So we get 9 scenarios, which is great. I love that. If there is a lot of interest in the community and with our board, I'd love to see them offer out what a potential custom scenario might be. And it might be based on some of the thought leaders and the things that they're hearing out there. I am nervous about all the uncertainties and this moment in time. Like we have to do it. I'm glad we're doing it, but it does make me nervous that we do have such volatile markets, and now we're trying to make predictions for 25 years in the future. So I understand it's a dynamic process, but we do have to make decisions that we might be locked into for 30 years. So anything we can do as we continue having these discussions to be very clear about what our assumptions are when we're putting into these models. And, I don't know how big of a swing it's going to be in the uncertainties when we choose between this path and that path, because it seems pretty broad. But I did like the experience I saw on the first page. It reminded me of very like actuarial type of experience of working with, I think it was an uncertainty analysis and AECC. So I think having experience dealing with that is really critical. So I appreciated that.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen up there on the screen. We appreciate your time and, you'll work with Ed and I think you've heard some of the guidance that the commission is giving to you about public input in that process. And Ed, I'm sure you are aware of that. So let's move on. Thank you very much.
I get a bathroom break.
We need a bathroom break. 5 to 8 minute bathroom break.
Please turn off your mics. Thank you.
It's water I'm drinking. I better use it time wise.
Yeah.
Celsius, huh? My daughter chose some, we tried, then I read something up, this health guy said, I would never put that shit in my life. All right, that is, so I gotta finish this 12-pack I bought. Yeah.
Madam Mayor, it's 7:49. It looks like everybody is back.
We
and
are?
We are live.
And we are ready to go. We are on number D, item D, agreement with American Wire Group LLC for the purchase and delivery of wire and cable. And before we start, do you have any public comment, just that I can read for this one?
I have no more public comment on any item for the rest of the evening.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Liberty or
And I will
someone,
be asking Assistant Director Walt Gill to speak to this one as well.
Mr. Gill.
Madam Mayor, Honorable Commissioners, Walt Gill, Assistant Director, Transmission Distribution for the City of Lake Worth Beach Electric. Good evening. For American Wire Group, all this is just giving us another vendor that we can purchase our wire and cable from. It is for the 22 cycle. And that's pretty much it. It's just giving us another means of purchasing wire.
And I'm assuming that this is something that you need. It's not frivolous.
That is correct.
You need wire.
I would think.
Especially with the supply chain the way it is right now. So.
Yeah, really, you can get it, get it. Do I have a
Motion to approve.
do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Second to that.
Commissioner McBoy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wire guy.
The wire guy. Item E, which is the First Amendment to Hooper Corp. Work Order number 1.
That's correct. So we, back in 2018, we entered into a contract for work to be performed, time and equipment contract for work to be performed by Hooper
Mhm.
Corporation for the 6,000 2, 3, and 4 circuits out of the Canal Yard substation out west of town. Those were actually ranked our second, third, and fourth performing circuits. And when we did our fourth performance circuit criteria. Is our first engineering. Our own internal engineers were the first ones that actually went out there and designed and engineered this project. As we got into the project, it became obvious that more poles needed to be set to increase our wind loading capabilities between our spans to achieve our Category 5 strength that we want to achieve onto the system. And what further exasperated this was going into the backyards and actually seeing the damage. I do have pictures that I can pass around if anybody would like to see.
They are pretty scary pictures.
What we have been coming up with.
Could we put them in the public record, Madam Clerk?
Absolutely. I'll forward them over to her.
Thank you.
So we're asking one, to allow Hooper to continue to work out west so we can continue our strip program on the western circuits, as well as finish up the work that we have to do out there.
And this is $2 million additional.
$2 million additional for this one here. Yes,
And
ma'am.
these poles that we're setting this time, are these the concrete poles or are you doing concrete and
combination.
wood?
It's a combination of concrete, wood, and ductile iron.
These are very frightening photographs.
So this is a situation where the contractors bid on a time and material basis, and then we evaluate as we go. So as they get into the backyards, you can imagine it's very difficult to look down the alley, down the end of the street, across the backyards, and figure out what needs to be done. You don't realize how bad it is until you actually get on the ground or climb that pole and realize you can't just
There's
redo
no
the
pole there.
There's no pole there. It's shot and we don't know why it's even standing anymore. So these poles in this area have been out there, we believe, at least since 1980, when the area was converted to 26 kV. It's possible that some of these poles or many of these poles existed prior to that, and they just attached 26 kV infrastructure on top of the old 4 kV poles.
For the people who are listening, can you explain out there and where out west is?
Yes, so these circuits actually cover the areas from Military Trail east into to 95,
Okay.
north up to 10th Avenue North, south to a little bit past 6th Avenue South.
Thank you.
Yes.
Commissioner Malik, still.
That first
Oh,
pole
I'm
that you're
sorry.
looking at there, that's actually what we call a green pole, which is a relatively new pole.
Mhm.
So that when you look at the pole and you really don't see any damage with that pole until you actually dig down into the base and actually do a check on that pole. And the entire base, I actually
Gone.
pushed that pole with my hand.
Oof.
So it's basically swinging off the conductor.
And this is harder stuff to get at because there's no alleys, right?
There's no alleys. It's in people's backyards. We have to ask them to get permission to the backyards. We bring our machines in there. If we have to remove fences, we'll remove fences and then replace the fences, so on and so forth. Any damage to any of their property, sodding, driveways, anything like that, the contractor's responsible to repair that as they go through.
Commissioner Stokes.
Oh, I'm hoping not tonight, but just maybe for the next meeting, or something that we can pass around to see the impact of, the additional funds that we have to use. I understand it's unavoidable and this isn't the only one and they're in the millions of dollars. So I'm just curious as, we borrowed money for SHRIP 1 and we're taking out more money for another SHRIP. And so I'm just curious, it seems like it's likely we're going to get less for the amount of money. At the end of the day, we're probably going to end up with less than we had hoped because of inflation, because of these unexpected things. So I'd like a way for us to somehow either track it or know how this is impacting our, what we thought we were going to have. And if we need to reevaluate, because I think at the end of SHRIP 2, some of that money is supposed to be used to start projects in SHRIP 3. And so I just wonder, as these things evolve, what are the checkpoints to see these things happen along the way that were unexpected, and here's the impact that we're having on them. Because
Right.
it seems pretty significant.
It is significant. So
Yes.
I'll give you an explanation on how we're already doing that. So one is we do track the burn rate on the dollars on each round of SHRIP funding. So we know how many dollars we got or we're authorized to spend and how much we've committed and how much has actually gone out in cash. The lessons learned in SHRIP 1 were incorporated into the estimates that we used in SHRIP 2. So some of that is baked in. The difficulty is that until you actually go out and climb each pole and touch each pole, you don't know for sure what had to be done. So it's very hard to get a fixed price contract from a vendor to go out and fix this stuff. So what we do is we tend to use time and material, and these contractors were all selected via a competitive process. And we don't just have one, we actually have at least 3 or 6.
We actually have 6 contractors on.
So for each portion of the work, we ask them for their hourly rates, their pricing, and when we look at the coverage, how they've been performing, what their productivity has been, how many crews they can dedicate to this. So we actually use this company, Hooper, and L.E. Myers to do work for us, and I believe Wilco is the third contractor we use. So depending on how much work we've given any one of them, the next phase, the ability to mobilize without a significant expense because it was a cost to mobilize, make materials available to them and lay down yards that are kind of segregated by contractor. So we don't have multiple contractors working out of the same storage yards and parking yards with trucks and things like that. So we allocate the work. So when you get into this work, you realize that there was more work that had to be done, that you couldn't do all the engineering up front to predict it, because you're not saying build it all new. You're saying go in there and fix what you think needs to be fixed, and we want to approve it before you do it.
Right.
So we have our own people shadowing them and saying, okay, yes, we agree this pole needs to be replaced, or this one's okay, or this span is a little bit long. Our calculations show that we should insert another pole in the middle, which will increase the overall strength of the span. So we're doing that stuff as we go. And we provide the materials for the job. The contractors don't provide the materials. They provide the labor and the equipment necessary to get the poles in there and stand them up. But we provide the poles, the cross arms, the insulators, the wire.
$2 million just for labor?
Yeah, labor but let me point out that they also come with all of their own equipment, right? So if we had to buy this equipment, they probably have 3 or 4 crews at a time. Each crew is probably our cost about $600,000 plus worth of equipment. Just to have it out there. So that's all built into their hourly rate.
And to do this proactively rather than have a call from somebody out at Military Trail saying my pole just fell on my house.
Right. Or hundreds
Took
of,
it out
if not
and
thousands
took
of
out a
calls
lot of
during a
people.
storm.
It's
So
definitely important work. City manager, if I might have a request, I just think because this is such these are large projects and we're investing a lot of money. I would love to just see you maybe on a listed on a project basis, kind of, every time we approve this, like what progress we're making. I think it would just be nice for us, as we're doing this, like, okay, well, of SHRIP 1, these were the 10 projects, finish that one, or 80% on the way to completion here. Here's our burn rate of the money that we're going through, and do the same for SHRIP 2. I think just, I know it's usually maybe a project management thing, but I'm used to that. Like, kind of just, are you in the green? Like, I'm on track to finish my project.
Like
on
updates.
time,
You want a
under,
regular
I'm
update?
yellow, I'm a little scared, like just a good, quick, high level overview of all the things all the improvements we're doing and how we're tracking, I think.
Because like this $2 million, like you're saying, like how many poles are we putting in?
I'd have to look at,
It's in the hundreds, I believe.
it's in the well over hundreds.
Because it says they're going to be done within 45 to 60 days.
With the 6004 circuit on the next one is the next change order, the next amendment is for the rest of the circuit out there.
There's more work. So, and what we've tried to do is to monitor, and we are doing this well, is monitoring their productivity. Say, how much work are we getting out of contractor A? You know, how fast can they progress through these neighborhoods with these backyards? And how did our own people perform in those areas? Because this work, some of it was actually started, and the methods that the contractors using were first pioneered, if you will, by our own crews who started the work, but we just couldn't go through this. So our own crews are doing very similar work in other parts of the system. That's why they're working 6 days a week as well. But we look at the productivity across the contractors to say, is it reasonable? Are we getting the right amount of work product for what we're doing?
Exactly, for what we're paying.
And these same contractors, by the way, are also going door to door when we do conversions, for example, with customers, we have to take an outage. They're the ones who are going door to door. Also, we're getting door hangers out. So they're also interacting with the public. And the feedback that we've gotten anecdotally from the public has been positive with respect to the contractors and the work that they're doing, as well as our own people.
Thank you. Commissioner Diaz.
Tree trimming and vegetation stuff, that's covered by us, right? So it's not included in this?
That's correct. We have a separate tree trimming and vegetation management contract. And what we attempt to do is, rather than delay the crews and have them do it at an extra cost to us, we target to have our own vegetation crews go through the area first so that they can come in and then do their work without interference and without slowing them down.
Commissioner McBoy?
Which is work we need to do on our own vegetation management cycles anyway, but there's a lot of work in coordinating that.
Commissioner McBoy?
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think we all up here see the need for doing the work. I looked at some of those polls. I think you can get another couple of years out of a couple of those, but
Well, that's, it's funny that you say that, because that's the mentality.
That's what's happened
That's
over the
what's
years.
happened,
Yeah,
I can get another 3 years out of that,
clearly they're bad. And those are obviously bad. Sometimes, they're pretty good and you can get a year or two out of them at some point. Yeah, no. My only concern is probably somewhat similar to what was mentioned earlier. This is basically a change order for an extra 2 million plus. And I heard the mention that you don't always know as you start the project. You get some unexpected things, and you don't know until you look. I get that, and that's normal in any, whether it's electrical or otherwise. But I would think that one might have gone out and said, you know what, we're certainly not going to inspect all the poles, but why don't we hit every 10th pole, see how it looks? They were probably put in about the same time, or at least an area was put in about the same time. So if we get every 10th, I'm a little surprised at a $2 million, cost overrun. That was usually you build in some contingency or you do some upfront, quickie, let's tap, like the guys that check for a home inspection, they bang on the soffits and whatnot and say, yeah, it looks pretty good.
I think, no, that's a very good point. But what we worked with here was what we were able to observe from the ground without actually going into the backyards and climbing all the poles. It got a little bit different once you get into the backyard and you actually get up on the pole and the contractor comes back down and says, I can't put a cross arm. There's nothing to bolt to, or the top pin is falling off, or the pole is swaying and I realize it's rotten at the base, but it looked okay. It looked okay. So it would be very difficult to say to somebody, hey, bid this on a fixed price contract. They'd say, well, I'm going to take that risk. I'm going to put a really high number, not a low number, right? So that's why we went with the time and material as an estimate, and we kind of meter it out as we go. My instruction staff is, hey, I'd like to do more frequent revisits. Let's not go to 2 million. Let's go, maybe 500,000 or something like that, and be back to. But we've been monitoring this and factoring it into our burn rate, if you will, on the cash. Not that we're burning money, but as we burn down through the revenue. But we look at it and say, now, based on what we've learned here, what do we think the next piece is going to cost us? Because it's equally difficult, or is it simpler?
Right. And it depends.
Right.
The other guys have a lot of experience, so you'll be able to guess pretty well.
The other part of this is that our reliability numbers, knock on wood, are getting better, and we'll do a mid-year reliability report, but they are getting better, surprisingly so. The tide is turning. But we keep in mind that when we have a storm, especially these backyard poles that are, if one pole comes down, you say, well, we've lost the service to that home, but it may be carrying the service to 200 homes further down the line, right?
Yeah.
And it's in a very difficult place to get to, which really severely affects our recovery time, the restoration time to rebuild the system after a storm. And we've really gotten lucky the last few years in terms of not having anything serious since Irma came through here in late 17.
Especially with those poles.
You're not
Right.
putting-
Really?
Right.
That's
So
insane.
we're hopeful. Now, after this, of course, these circuits all come out of that 26 yard at Canal, which we're going to be rebuilding. You've already approved some of the work there. So that will be going ahead. But we have more work to do on the 6001 and the 6000, which are the next ones that we have.
Three.
Yeah,
6003.
6003. Yeah, 6001, 6003. Going back to Commissioner Stokes, I can give you that information on a monthly basis, quarterly basis, however.
I want it in a graph.
I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you.
She likes colors, lots of colors.
Yeah, so something I could, at a glance, okay, this is how we're
That's
tracking.
so fun. I take,
Monthly
I look
or-
for a narrative.
I think monthly, and something I was thinking about too, as each of these, I appreciate when you guys put in the summary, this is a strip project. So if this is part of the strip, so if something like this comes up, just even pulling out one bar. So if we have a bar for every like major project, every time we're completing something, I imagine that bar would grow more towards completion. So it'd just be nice to have a high level view of where we are with all the various projects. And then as these come through, I wouldn't imagine updating the bar until that work was completed, but at least we could look at, okay, this of the 10 projects, this is the one we're talking about. It's 25% there. This, just something for us to be able to gauge.
By all means.
We are now running Microsoft Project or using Microsoft Project on these projects. It's probably an appropriate time to mention that one of the key people that we have doing this has decided to move on. He's going to go do this for somebody else. He's learned so much here. Paul Nicholas, who's a very important part of our staff for at least the past 5 or 6 or 7 years, is going to be moving on. We're going to miss him, and he's done a fantastic job for us, but we're already looking for his replacement. I've had a couple of
Good.
interviews, but he's got big shoes to fill, or we have big shoes to fill when he leaves. So I know, Paul, you're listening, so I'll say it in front of the commission. You've done a fantastic job, and we're going to miss you greatly. We will be in touch with him after he leaves, so we know where he lives, and he's promised to help us through the transition, even though he'll have responsibilities and obligations to his new employer. But he leaves in good standing. He's done a great job for the citizens and residents and customers of our city and our electric system. So thank you, Paul, and Godspeed on your next endeavor.
Yeah, Paul,
Congratulations.
sorry to see you go.
Yeah, we're gonna miss you, Paul.
Thank you so much. It's a bittersweet decision. Tough to leave what we've got started and the momentum that we have, but tough decision to make.
Well, we're sorry you made it the way you did.
I've chatted with him a little bit about that. If there was a way I could convince him to stay, I would have. But it's such a good opportunity for him that we're going to leave the door open for him and wish him well.
Thank you so much.
Hopefully, our paths will cross again.
Yeah.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Item F, which is fairly similar, which is the second amendment to the Hooper Corp. Work Order number 1.
And this work order allows us to finish the final circuit out there, the 6003, 6001. circuit.
Yeah, no, we're not doing that. You got this far, we're done.
Really? And I got to tell you, when I first moved here, I mean, it was sort of quaint that the electricity went out all the time. It was kind of a charming little asset of living in the city, and that's going back to 80. And the difference now is just remarkable. I mean, we rarely have an outage, and it's great. So,
I always have to add more, but to point out that these circuits, these 6,000 series circuits that all come out of that Canal Station, there's actually 4 circuits that come out of there today, representing about 5,900 customers on those 4 circuits. Because of the work that we're doing here, and then when we rebuild a new Canal substation, we'll go from serving these customers on 4 circuits, we'll split them up into 8 circuits. So the exposure in any one circuit will be far less. And then we'll add, if you will, interconnecting segments so that we can double them up again if we need to in the event of an outage. So not only are we just rebuilding, not just rebuilding what's already there, but we're going to add more functionality to it, which will give us even more ability to carry more load in the future as load grows. For example, we talk a lot about electric vehicles. That's going to grow the demand on the system, but it'll also allow us to have the flexibility to restore from outages or route around outages much quicker than we can today.
Thank you. Do I have a motion?
I do have a question though. This one is similar to the last one. My only concern that they're both coming from Hooper, you know, it's a known thing in the world that sometimes people bid a little low and then come in with change orders. That's
I fully understand your concern with that, and I also am aware of that as well.
sure.
With Hooper, that wasn't the case with them. This was just some serious stuff that we had going on out there in the backyards once we got out there and everything.
So this one is
Yeah, this
parallel to the
this
last.
one, we actually for this item on here, I actually and my team actually walked pole to pole with Hooper on this one so we can get a truer number.
Well, and I see detailed handwritten, every single street poles, I mean, open wires.
Right.
So that was a good detail to see on this. I did have a question in regards to the surety bond and us being an extension of this contract. Does the surety bond still cover the extension on the contract? Because I can't see any expiration date on it.
Paul, do you have the answer, Paul?
Yep, Madam Mayor, that's a great question. So typically what we do, the sureties, prior to them moving forward with the addition or changes to the actual bond, they like to have the executed agreement in hand. So what we typically do is once we get the fully executed contract back or amendment, we would issue that to the contractor, in this case, Hooper. We would tell them to proceed with adding the additional funds to the surety bond, and we will not release the changed or revised purchase order to them until we get a copy of that recorded bond.
Thank you. When you do that, Paul, can you make sure that they put City of Lake Worth Beach, not just City of Lake Worth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now we have G, which is an agreement with Stewart C. Irby Company for the purchase and delivery of underground cable.
Kind of like this is alluding to American Wire. It just gives us another vessel for us to purchase underground cable and wire, another avenue to go down.
Another
Another place
vendor.
that we can actually compare and everything,
Oh.
another vendor and everything. So
All right, do you have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now with H, which is the relocation, the temporary relocation of customer service so that the building can be worked on. It's due to take about 2 years.
Yes, Madam Mayor. I've had one of many lifelines tonight. Nanette is here as our customer service manager. So we've all had the opportunity, I hope, to tour the customer service building at the annex and have seen the conditions of that space. Thank
The pleasure or the opportunity?
the opportunity. Maybe not the pleasure, but we do have people working there every day. So as we all know, we've all talked about it. We want to do the renovation, and thank you for supporting the funding, the bond issue, which will cover the renovation. So while we do the renovation, though, we have to have these folks into an appropriate space. And because of the condition of that space, we'd rather not wait. It's important for us to get those folks out of there. We do have an employee retention issue. It's a working condition that's really not good. And I really want to deliver that for our people to get them into appropriate space. We did a lot of research, and it was important for us to remain very close to the downtown. We wanted to be in a building that would, withstand a storm. And
That one will?
we're better than the one that we're in right now, which is
Oh, the other, oh, yeah, okay.
the new space. So
Not the annex. I
so we're
surprised to hear that.
we looked at the space there, and we were able to find actually two different spaces in the same building, which serves us well in this way. One is that there's a downstairs space that's immediately accessible to the public, which will be the intake where customers come in for that face-to-face service. And it's catty corner, like a block away from the existing building. So they'll be able to come into that ground floor office space. We'll have 2 or 3 staff right there working in that office area to handle their day-to-day issues. And it'll actually be much nicer space than they're coming into today.
Yeah.
The balance, the mid office and back office of customer service will then be upstairs on the second floor with proper security. And it's outfitted with furniture today and has the ability to support from an IT perspective the connections that we'll need. Now, IT is going to work with us, and we've already had conversations with them about helping us set up the phone lines and the servers and all the connectivity that we'll need. So that will allow us to move out of the space that we're in, be nearby, and then really clear the way for that space to have some more intrusive opening up of walls, opening up of floors to see what we're dealing with in terms of a structure and what work may be needed inside to renovate that.
Yeah, speaking of not knowing what you're going to get till you get in there.
Right. I think all of you, or all of us, I know I have at times in my life renovated an older home, and you open up a wall and you're like, uh-oh. I didn't
I'm
count.
avoiding it. I'm just wait till I pass it on to somebody else. Question, the one room that has just nothing but the storage, the giant like boxes and boxes of paper, is that going to go away?
Well, we still need storage because there's record retention.
Right, but I mean, that just, number one, it seems to be way overburdening that building because of the weight. It's a little spooky and it could be used for better things than a storage, I would think.
Are you thinking the second floor?
No, first
No,
floor,
no, the end.
when you walk in.
One second.
Well, yeah, no,
Which
it's,
one? Are you
Yeah,
talking about
near the-
promenade, the new building or the old?
No, he's talking about the second floor of the annex building,
the annex.
which is beyond our scope.
That's the
Right.
museum.
No, we
We're not doing it.
Yeah, we're not doing anything with the second floor. This is only the first floor. But in regards to the records, what we would seek to do is I hate to have, brand new space renovated to store boxes of papers that are decades old, right? So we will go through the records retention to get rid of what we don't need,
Yeah,
and then find a more appropriate way to store those. It might be that we need to have Connex boxes or a container
could you
someplace.
digitize them?
Yeah,
It-
I'm looking at possibility of scanning these items.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. We're looking at some of the possibility of scanning items
Right.
in, so we don't have to have an actual hard copy of it.
Right,
Some we do. Some of them are cash receipts. And there's. quite-
from how old?
Oh, gosh.
I mean, how long do you have to, I have to keep my stuff 7 years.
There's different things for different, for the cash receipts, I believe it is 5 years.
Okay.
There are some other records that we can hold for 3 years and then some for 7 contracts, customer correspondence.
Fortunately, the boxes are labeled by year.
Yeah.
Right.
So that we can go through them and say, okay, this year is outside the retention policy.
Yeah.
Go ahead and have the shredder come
Because
in.
I mean, that room could be put to much better use.
Right.
than-
Heck, yeah.
And we want to make sure that if we're going to, the document destruction of these records has to be appropriate too, so we don't have confidential information winding up and, blowing in the landfill.
Giant trucks come. One day I had 72 boxes trashed outside my office. We digitalized everything and had the truck come. It was 72 boxes.
Oh, my gosh.
But we would certainly like to get rid of the business of storing paper and put that space to better use if we're going to renovate it.
And
Commissioner
we've
Legal?
already started to go through some of these boxes too,
Yeah,
because I don't want to let
Right.
things wait to the last minute. And that's just a
Yeah.
nightmare.
Yeah.
So we have done a lot of that already. And now we're in the process of looking at individual desks. What can you get rid of? You don't need this stuff.
yeah. Yeah, and it seems like something outside the scope of your normal people. So it might like hire people just to come in on a temporary basis and do that.
Well, we're actually thinking about doing it on the weekend too,
Oh, okay.
So, because we are having, you know what a small staff we have.
Yeah.
So if we
Sounds like a
can.
great job for interns.
I was just exactly thinking the
Oh,
same
do you
thing.
have, send them by.
Give it to Neil in HR. She's working on them.
I do have a question. I don't see anything in here that states that we can extend this lease or that we can leave it early. If the building is done within 2 years, can we give them 60 days notice and say, okay, even though we had a lease, our project's done? And I don't see anything in here saying that we have a extension option.
Well, there is at least, it's a
there-
2-year term, but
there is
after a
2
year we
years.
can terminate.
That's right.
After a year, you can terminate,
Right.
but with how much notice?
90 days.
90
90 days? Okay. And what if we need to extend it?
I think they'd be happy.
They
to
were
keep it.
very happy to do that.
They would be very happy. Okay.
That building's
I
been
just-
empty a
Well, we're
long
saying that today. We're saying that today, but you know, things could change in 2 years.
Actually,
And that could be.
this, one of the difficulties we had was that we fell in love with some space in the building, but we couldn't move fast enough to actually grab it. So the space that we're referring to now was just vacated recently, correct?
Right. It was vacated. It's actually known as the Promenade. It's 120
Right.
North Federal. Very nice building.
Mhm.
So it was a mortgage company that was in there. And they had only been in there for 2 months. And
Ooh.
unfortunately, the owner had a stroke
Hmm.
and couldn't operate the business.
But could we probably put in something about maybe renewing after the first term to renew it? I think Chris would work with us on that.
Yeah.
We could certainly look at that. And there's also, we'll be following up on the furnishings because rather than buying, it doesn't make sense for us to dismantle the furniture that's in the other building and move it, reassemble it, and then dismantle it, move it back, especially since some of it's quite old already
I
anyway.
don't know if it would make it.
So we're going to consider trying to make a deal, which we don't want to discuss in public at the moment, with regards to what we could potentially buy the furniture that's in that space, which is relatively new furniture, and we wouldn't have to incur the moving expenses.
Mhm.
And then at the point in time where we go back to the annex, we could just then move it at that time, or pursue some other avenue with it.
And the furniture that they do have in that new building is on a call center
Uh-huh.
type setup,
Right.
which is ideal.
Right. Commissioner Stokes.
No, this is great. At first I thought that it was a little more fancy than what we would need, but I appreciate the location.
Mhm.
And I'm really concerned about the people who are going to be showing up to the annex and how we're going to point them in the right direction. So I imagine that they don't want any Lake Worth Utilities signage on their property, on the exterior. Have we talked about?
We can put signage up there
Yeah.
on our front door. Downstairs, we will need it. We don't necessarily want people coming upstairs.
Right, so it will be noticeable on the downstairs entry. And then are we covering up that big blue? The signs that we have everywhere, like what are at the annex now? It's like Lake Worth Utilities, or are we gonna put we're gonna keep that there and have a sign in 3 languages, go
Well,
this
we'll
with
have-
a map?
We'll have to work through the details of exactly how that's going to happen.
Okay.
There's some things that we want to keep there. For example, there's a deposit, the drop-off box, which is the drive-up box. We want to keep that. We may add another one over at the new location so people can drop stuff at either one without having to come into the building.
Right.
But we like the idea of the people being able to just drive up and drop that thing off and
Right,
drop that envelope and go.
great. Yeah, so please, as clear, whatever we can do to make it, a map, I think would be helpful, especially for people that speak other languages. And I love the proximity.
Mhm.
So any way that we can make it very obvious.
We could just put
Right.
arrows on the
Right.
sidewalk.
There you go.
to the new- to the
Little
open
stickers.
thing, right?
Yeah.
Go this way.
Stop, wait for the pedestrian walk.
And we're going to attempt to, we'll have to see how it goes during the construction process, but the longer that we can keep the parking spaces available, the better.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to lose, but invariably I would suspect that during the construction process, that construction vehicles may need some
Will
parking.
Staff park at the promenade parking lot? Is that?
It's
there
first
enough
come,
parking?
first serve. Yeah, that was one of our big concerns because right now it's all to ourselves.
Yeah.
So over at the new place, you do share it with other businesses,
Mhm.
but there's also side parking. Also, we happen to come in early. So I'm hoping,
What was it?
we do start
Early.
early in the morning. We start at 8 o'clock and not all the businesses there start that early. So,
So we're making friends. Quick.
But will our customers be able to park?
Yeah, that was my other thing.
I will tell you, I was a member of the credit union there, and 5 out of 7 times I could not get a parking spot to go to the credit union in the same building.
But it's no worse than the parking that we have at our own
Right now,
building today,
right?
which is,
I mean, there
which is,
still is on-street parking.
which is
for the-
exactly, they can just walk a block over.
Yeah.
We conceivably, it seems like there's often parking where the pharmacy is and.
Right, now I
the
have
It's
banks.
empty.
I have
Could we
looked at
get
those
the employees
buildings.
Maybe to park there and walk across
They already do.
and.
They what?
They already do. We have some that already park
Okay.
on
mean,
that
not-
building.
Illegally parked.
No, no, no.
Some arrangement.
Right, we may have to enter into some arrangement.
No, and then PMC, we will be speaking to them to say, hey, we don't want to intrude on your property, but can we use it? Because there is a large area that
It
they
seems
do
like
not
there's a
use.
lot of space there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's also street parking just north
of that. It's on the building, it's on the north
Second
portion
half.
of it.
Mhm.
And you can park there. And I thought that was all residential, which it is. But Chris was telling me that you can park there. There's no restrictions.
Yeah, it's all on street. Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Madam,
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Nanette,
Thank
thank you very much.
Ma'am.
Thank you.
City manager.
City manager has something to say. Sorry.
that's okay. Thank you for your support in this. We're excited about the move and the renovations to come. I do want to say that of course, I've toured the building as well. And once we begin the renovations and the work, I think we need to do an overall assessment of the building.
Yes.
And so we will do that to make sure that the building is conducive once we finish. Because what we want to do is make sure that we don't have damages to the new renovation. So we want to make sure we do a full assessment and review of making sure that the building's in good order. Because we've recently had some water damage, am I right?
Yeah.
Jeanette? Right, so we want to make sure that we address that from the top down, of course, and make sure we fortify the building.
And I see in some of the supplemental budget, the storm wind, hurricane windows and things like that. I think if that building is as important as I believe it is,
Yes.
we do need to take care of it and make.
There are also no sprinkler systems in that building. When I was touring the historical, I realized that there was not one sprinkler
Yeah.
in case of a fire. So that, I don't know if that's
Right, so in short, you will hear more from me about this building.
Okay.
Because I think this is a very important building for the city. This is our visitor center. It houses our museum. So I think it's something we need to certainly treat well.
Can we take before and after, and so we can show the public, like,
Yeah.
this is what it looked like, and now this is what we're doing
Yeah.
for our employees? I think that's important.
a good
Pictures
idea.
speak a
And the
thousand words.
public.
They're going to get
That's what I'm talking
spoiled. They're not going to want
That's
to
what I'm
come
talking
back.
about. The public knows that, that this is where the money's going, and this is why we're spending it on this
We
building.
just have to show them the bathroom, the ladies' bathroom on the first floor to get an idea of the state of that building. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
So I have a second?
Second.
All right, everyone, see you 9:00.
Aye, favor, aye.
Aye,
Aye.
aye. I want to hear a nay to that one. And tomorrow morning, and Madam Clerk.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
We hate to bother you, but it's a recurring thing that and I know it's probably a pain in the neck, but could you send out that link the night before the pre-agenda meetings or the day before so they're at the top of our very, very busy emails? Because
They should be on your calendars because I did them for the whole year.
I don't get it like that.
Can we do the link for there seem to be some generational issues and some of us would like the link.
I
don't
will be
think I
happy to
remember
send
this,
the
but
link.
I don't use that calendar the way I think other people may do it. So is it the same
Okay,
every
I
time?
will send the link the night before, but in tomorrow's case, I will send it first thing in the morning.
That's fine. Is it the same?
Please turn off your mics.
Is it the same every night, every day, every week, every meeting, that link?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
You can bookmark it?
Can you use the Google link? Yeah, thank you.
I actually.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.